Welcome into another Friday morning show where Jeff Bell and I look at every single upcoming matchup for this week's NFL slate. We are in week 6. It feels like the season is just flying past us. First note, Houston Texans, Minnesota Vikings, both on bye, so get them out of your lineups. Last night we had a really fun Thursday night football game. The Philadelphia Eagles losing to the New York Giants 34-17. It seems like something special is brewing in New York with Jackson Dart and Cam Scattaboo. Jeff, before we jump into all of these games, any major takeaways from last night?
Yeah, we talked pre-show, and if we could, our cycles would be synced at this point. But like we got on, and I was telling you of like my big idea where I'm feeling right now is inflection points in the season, because we'll get to it, but Washington, Chicago, and you look back, that felt like a big inflection point. Last week, you gave me a little bit of grief about being worried about this Buffalo New England game, but then we see the Patriots go out and win that game, and that just completely changed the shape of the AFC East race. And I think last night was an example of one of those games where you have the Giants, and they put their new quarterback in, they beat the Chargers, and then they're feeling sky high. Then they go and lose to the Saints, give the Saints their first win, and you're feeling like, well, what's going on here with the Giants? And they easily, in the past, I think you could have run into a situation where they tell themselves, we're not a very good team. We lost to the Saints. We're just going to get smoked by the Eagles. And instead, they've got these two frat boys running around that just don't care about like any of those things, and Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. And you really look at, and last night on the Audible Live, and feel free to go check that out, we had Mike Cash on, and you did a fantastic job with me and Matt Waldman. But I look at draft classes sometimes, and the one that came to mind was the Seattle draft class, where they got Russell Wilson, and they got, I'm pretty sure Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor were all in the same class. So basically, in one class, you brought in a franchise quarterback, and you built the Legion of Boom, and that led to titles. And to me, this Giants draft class has really felt like you've had this franchise that you knew there was talent on the Giants team. You knew you had Malik Neighbors, you had Kayvon Thibodeau, you had Brian Burns, you had Dexter Lawrence in the middle. But at the same time, it just, last year's team, just something was missing. It wasn't there. There wasn't a like identity. Amazon's crew did a great job last night talking about identity, but there wasn't an identity on last year's Giants team. And I think this year you see this draft class come in, and we talk about Scatterbo, we talk about Dart, but then you've got Abdul Carter at the very top of the draft. He's been an absolute stud, and that's freed up Brian Burns, who leads the NFL in sacks. And it's just this infusion of talent that it brings, not only talent, but just the mentality. And you see it of like Jackson Dart makes a big run, and their entire sideline is just exploding. They're ready to go. And like Washington, I think, is a great example of that last year, where you have this Commanders team that earned the second pick in the draft, and all these games just break in their direction. And all of a sudden they have the belief in themselves swells. They believe in Jaden Daniels as their quarterback, and they carry that all the way to the NFC title game. And so I think it's a really interesting week to kind of unpack some of those things.
And I think we saw some of that last week too. And I wrote about this in my article. Like you say, these inflection points. I wrote about the Arizona Cardinals game, how, like, it felt like this should have been an easy win to help get them back on track in what was a very tight NFC West. But then we see the goal line fumble, then we see the interception fumble into the end zone for a Tyler Lockett touchdown, like the missed extra point. Like, it was just such a weird, wonky game. And now all of a sudden, like, Tennessee has this belief in themselves, like, hey, we actually can win a game. And meanwhile, you can see the Arizona Cardinals might end up spiraling just like the Bears did last year after that Hail Mary faux pas with Tyreek Stevenson. So yeah, I mean, I think this is that point in the season where like teams start to figure out their identity. And you want to talk about identity. I don't know if there is like a better duo, Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo, kind of embodying the identity that Brian Dable wants to build with his team. So yeah, really fun game to watch. And Giants fans have to be feeling pretty excited with what they've seen from Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo through these first few weeks. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump in.
Jackson Dart conversation. Yeah. I think the Jackson Dart's the interesting conversation, because he's a top 12 quarterback since he started playing in his
rushing
package.
all over.
Yeah. And so I think that, I mean, this is technically the Dynasty show, but if he's still valued semi close to where he was when he was drafted, I mean, that might be, if you're a rebuilder out there and you identify at this point you're 1-4, you need to make a move. Jackson Dart might be the type of guy to go out in a super flex league to go get.
I also want to say Mike Kashuba. You shouted him out real quickly before we jump into the whole show. I want to say Mike Kashuba was on the show last night, the Audible Live with you guys. He was on the Launchpad with me this week as well, which just came out this morning. For those who don't know, Mike is a big part of what we do with the Football Guys Rookie Guide. And Jeff, you guys are going to be alternating weekly now on the Big Board
Yeah.
article. So definitely check out what Mike is doing. He's been putting in really, really good work lately. Just a sharp guy who understands football inside and out. Mike Kashuba, Launchpad, the Audible Live, Rookie Guide, the Big Board. He's doing a lot for us over at Football Guys, so definitely pay attention to him. But let's go ahead and jump in, Jeff. Denver Broncos at New York Jets. We've got another international game. This one is going to be in London. So once again, like we always say, be sure to get those guys in your lineups, but check before kickoff just in case there are any last-minute scratches. The good news is right now, nobody's really on the injury report that we care about too much. Broncos players are all healthy. Justin Fields has been on the practice report with a knee issue, but practicing in full, so no concern there. The only guy that might not play is Alan Lazard, who isn't practicing for personal reasons. And I could be wrong, Jeff. I should have checked this before we recorded. I don't think he traveled with the team. I think he stayed back in the States while they all went over to London. Could be wrong there, but it sounds like he is hoping for a trade as he has just kind of been phased out of the game plans here. So nothing huge here to talk about from an injury standpoint, but I think looking at this game, the big question I have is we have seen Justin Fields when he's had plus matchups against bad defenses, he's given us 30 plus fantasy points. We saw him go up against a good defense in Buffalo, and he gave us 4 fantasy points and left the game early with an injury. So Denver's defense is good. Are we expecting a 4-point game? Are we expecting 30 plus, or are we expecting somewhere in the middle?
I'm expecting a lower score here out of Justin Fields. I brought up my idea of a hot dog quarterback on when I did the Chris Harris's show leading into last week, and I had Justin Fields as the perfect hot dog quarterback where you don't want to see the points made. And if you're like watching the game and it was a mess and you're freaked out at the beginning of the fourth quarter because it's 3 points, and then all of a sudden all you need to do is enjoy the hot dog at the ball game. You look at your score at the end of the week, and Justin Fields was like, I think he was close to, like we said, 27 points or so. Got to where you were hoping that he gets to, but through the process was messy. I don't know if he gets there this week. I think it's what we're seeing out of the Jets offense is exactly probably what we would want to see, because they've gotten hyper targeted with Garrett Wilson, with Mason Taylor, with Breece Hall. And that was kind of what we speculated in the offseason, of Mason Taylor stepping into the number 2 target there, really distilling targets that even if you don't have a lot of passing volume, they're able to have these pieces hit. And that's the way I talk about clean and dirty offenses. That's the way that these clean offenses run, of being able to overcome concerns about overall volume because it's just so hyper focused.
Yeah. And are you starting Mason Taylor this week? I mean, he has been red hot, 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure how much I'm buying into this, but I'm buying into it enough that I've got him ranked inside my top 12, and I'm starting him in a handful of leagues where I'm streaming tight end.
So right now he is my, let's see, I'm sorry. I clicked on the wrong thing.
Oh, you're good.
He's my tight end 15 right now, which probably is a little bit low. I'll probably bump him up a little bit. I did take the cheese.
But still, he's in the streamer discussion at tight end 15.
But
like, tight end 8 to tight end 18 are all pretty much the same player. Like, we're both putting him in the streaming discussion is what we're saying. And you talk about the hot dog quarterback in my home league, 10 teams, short benches. And of course, in a league like that, I'm never drafting a quarterback. I'm just going to churn and stream and figure it out. And I got sniped on Justin Fields and kind of made a little bit of a can't believe I got sniped on Justin Fields comment in the group chat. At the end of the third quarter, I said, never mind, I didn't even want him. And then by the end of the game, I said, never mind, I was joking. I really wish I had him in my lineup. That ended up being the difference between me winning and losing last week. So always a good time watching those garbage time points accumulate. But let's go ahead into the afternoon games.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Denver, I think, is a good example of, we talk about inflection points, where they had that Indianapolis loss in week 2, that last second, they got the extra play, and then they lose to the Chargers, a very close game in week 3. This is a team that came in with high expectations. The conversation around Bo Nix was starting to mount coming out of week 3, concerns about them. And then they just catch this hapless Bengals team. And, in a different world, maybe they're catching a Joe Burrow Bengals team and just feeling down on themselves, and Joe Burrow rips them up. And then all of a sudden this season is going this direction, but they were able to take advantage of that Bengals situation. Then last week we saw Philadelphia get up on them, and Denver didn't stop, and Denver kept fighting. They came back that second half, win that game. Now you're getting this Jets team that is just really struggling, and you feel like this could have been. You could make the argument we could have a 1-4 Denver Broncos team sitting here, and everybody's saying, "Oh my God, we thought this team was going to win the AFC West." Now they're very much primed to be 4-2, and just the different directions these seasons take sometimes.
Yep. Things change quickly, and teams can ride momentum for a handful of weeks, and I think that's what we're seeing with Denver right now. But let's go ahead and look at some of these later games. Los Angeles Chargers going to Baltimore to face off against the Lamar Jackson-less Baltimore Ravens. So we got Tutu Atwell limited with a hamstring injury on Thursday. Wasn't on the Wednesday injury report, so we'll keep an eye on that. Typically, when these guys pop up midweek, that's not a great sign. We'll see what he can do on Friday. If he practices, we're expecting him to play. If he doesn't practice, probably means that he's going to be out this week. Tyler Higbee didn't practice on Wednesday, limited on Thursday, trending in the right direction. And then, of course, with the Ravens, we've got Lamar Jackson not practicing. Zay Flowers has been limited with a shoulder injury. And then Devontae Walker has been limited with an oblique injury. So most likely looking at another Cooper Rush start here. And Jeff, what we have seen from Cooper Rush is that it's just bad. I don't think anybody expected this. Ravens seem to be sitting here at 1-4 right now, but going up against a tough Los Angeles team, they could quickly fall to 1-5. So what are we doing with the playmakers here on Baltimore? We've seen Derrick Henry has really struggled over the last 4 games, but especially with Cooper Rush. Hasn't been a whole lot of production from Zay Flowers either. Mark Andrews is kind of an afterthought. I mean, this feels like one where you want to start these guys because there's always the chance that they can score a touchdown, but at the same point, the floor for just about every pass catcher and running back in Baltimore right now feels like it's like 3 points.
Yeah, I'll do everybody a favor and I'll rank Derrick Henry low so that maybe we can get some Derrick Henry going. And
No, Jeff, you can't do this. I just did this on the fantasy show yesterday.
oh, really?
I said I had this whole fade Derrick Henry segment, and I said somebody in the industry needs to do it. I will be the one to fall on the sword. Like it's time to panic about Derrick Henry. So no, you can't do it, Jeff. I already did this one.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, so looking
I'm
at this,
falling on the sword. When he goes out for 35 points this week, y'all can thank me.
he's still going to be low in my ranks, but neither here nor there. I will bet him on anytime touchdown though, because that's the way it's been going. So the weather is supposed to be a factor in this one potentially.
Mhm.
It might be windy, rainy, and at some level that might be exactly what the Ravens need. Of just like, can we create this muddy game that we can just have Derrick Henry brutalize the interior of the Rams? The Rams have a very, very talented defensive end or defensive line, and I think
Mhm.
it's they have a good defense. They just got taken advantage of. Like it happens in these Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay games are, I feel like, are just bubble games, and you can't take too much out of
Yeah,
it. It's two guys that
100%. They know each
intimately
other
know each
inside
other
and out.
so well, and they're able to just invent these different things to take advantage of each other. I think it's you look at the surface level, you would expect that the Rams pieces do their thing the way that we saw the Houston Texans take advantage of the Ravens last week, and Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, all that goes off, and you have so much fun there. But if the weather comes into it, that's the Ravens' hope probably. I think it's tough to project that happening. I think the more likely outcome would be the Rams able to get up on them, score, build a lead. Does Cooper Rush make it through the game, or do they put Tyler Huntley in? It's one of those that I don't feel good about any of the Ravens pieces, but at the same time, unless you've got much better options, sometimes you just got to start these guys.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just been defenses have been playing the Rams so differently. I was looking at it this morning, or I'm sorry, I was looking at it yesterday. But last year, you look at the amount of average defenders in the box on a Derrick Henry carry. Last year, 6.1, that was 53rd among running backs. This year, it's up to 6.9, which is the 5th highest among running backs. So there's just no fear of the deep shot and the explosive plays without Lamar Jackson out there. They're just loading up the box. And honestly, like when you've got this defensive front that the Rams have with Kobe Turner and Jared Verse and Puna Ford, like you don't even really need to load the box. Like they've got a great defensive line as is. So this could end up being a relatively low scoring affair, especially if the weather is impactful. So this is one where there's a lot of impactful guys in fantasy. You know, you're starting Puka Nacua and you're starting Devontae Adams and you're starting Kyron Williams and you're starting your big name Ravens players, but this does feel like a potential letdown spot for both teams.
Yeah, and teams had the offseason to reset to look at this Ravens offense, and I think it's Matt Waldman made a good point last night talking about how it's usually 6 to 8 games of game film that the scouts want before they're
Mhm.
really going to dramatically change their game plan. And so we see so many of these two high cover shell defenses that they're playing base nickel. There's got an extra safeties, basically their nickel back. And when you're going up against, I think the Eagles are struggling with it, and I think the Ravens were struggling with it. Of the defenses were running their vanilla defense, or they're trying to game plan into it, but it's just so different than what you're seeing against a lot of other teams in the league. And so they were able to take advantage of it last year. You walk away from that, the Eagles win the Super Bowl. The Ravens were a very good team last year, and defensive coordinators spent an offseason saying, how can we stop these? And I think that the book is pretty much out on Derrick Henry at this point. You get him before he starts moving. He can't really go side to side the way that maybe he could at one
Right.
point in time. It's it's a freight train that can build momentum. It's like Juggernaut, basically, of like, you let him build the slightest momentum and you got a real problem. But if you hit him before that momentum starts, then he's in trouble.
And the numbers back that up, Jeff. 2.5 yards per carry, or I'm sorry, 2.5 yards before contact per attempt. That is zero point 0.6 fewer than last year, and that ends up generating fewer yards after contact per attempt as well. So, like, they're getting to him in the backfield. He's not getting those big wide lanes that he had last year, and it really is just kind of putting a damper on this entire offense.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next game. Dallas Cowboys at Carolina Panthers. CeeDee Lamb still not practicing. And I just want to say, like, this was an absurd injury report to have to pull. 21 Dallas Cowboys right now are on the injury report. We're only going to talk about the fantasy relevant ones, but CeeDee Lamb still not practicing with the ankle injury. We did see him, like, not taped up, not in a boot. He was on the field. So trending in the right direction, but almost assuredly not playing this week. Kevontae Turpin still dealing with a foot injury that has caused him to miss some time. He didn't practice as well. For the Carolina Panthers, we got for revenge game. I'm getting a little tripped up here. Miles Sanders is now a Dallas Cowboy. That's right. And he limited on Wednesday and then downgraded to a DNP on Thursday. Looking over at the Carolina Panthers, Chuba Hubbard has yet to log a practice as of Thursday. Jatavian Sanders limited on Wednesday, full participant on Thursday. And then Jalen Coker back at practice with that quadriceps injury. Started the year on IR. He is now practicing in full. So, Jeff, this is one I think we need to talk about the wide receivers here for the Dallas Cowboys. No CeeDee Lamb, no Kevontae Turpin. We haven't seen a ton from Jalen Tolbert, even though he was kind of supposed to be the number 2 guy. We saw a big blow-up spot from Ryan Flournoy last week. Do you think that can happen again here in week 6? Or are you looking at that week 5 production from Flournoy as a bit fluky? And I want to say, I know you were like a huge Flournoy guy, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I really loved him as a prospect coming in. And it's one of those, when you do the rookie guide, some of these small school guys, some of these off the radar guys, and Jalen Coker, to be honest, was another one too. That
Yeah.
I was one of the first ones in on too, on Coker as well. And so this is at some level, this is look at my babies go game. I think Flournoy, you look at what happened last week, that was all schemed up for Kevontae Turpin, I tend to believe. And then Kevontae Turpin wasn't able to clear for the game.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that was usage all over the field. And you're encouraged because you saw Flournoy be able to do that. And I think that when you look at the Cowboys offense, they need that element. We know what George Pickens is going to be, the intermediate to deep vertical player within this offense, especially when you look at the personnel that they have available. And then Jake Ferguson is eating, but it's like not going anywhere. I was running the numbers on him, and now
Second in the league in receptions. Like,
yeah.
only Puka Nacua, not tight ends, in the league. Only Puka Nacua has more receptions. It's wild.
Well, that, but we love to do the extrapolation game, or we love to do the 17 pace game, and I was doing that with my articles this week, the target report, and looking at, it's like Ferguson's on pace for like 140 receptions or something like that, and then I get to the yardage and it's like 900 yards, and it was like, oh, one of these things is not like the other, but that's
Yeah.
they really just
Wandale Robinson is way down the field.
Yes. And you mentioned Jalen Tolbert, but we saw the touchdowns last year, but Jalen Tolbert is what he is at this point. I don't think, and that's where Flournoy is interesting, because he is that player that they were running him on jet motion, those types of things that are built in for Turpin. He was making plays downfield. He can do a little bit of everything, and there's opportunity here in this Dallas offense for that.
So let's talk Rico Dowdle before we go on to the next game, because I think that's a necessary discussion to have. Looked fantastic last week. And I mean, even Dave Canales came out and is kind of implying that when Chuba Hubbard does return, that Rico Dowdle has earned a role, which we kind of speculated about earlier in the week. But now he's got this revenge game, and like, he has been very, very vocal about like how excited he is for this revenge game. And you look, I mean, this is a good Carolina Panthers offensive line. This is a very soft run defense for the Dallas Cowboys, soft secondary as well. But I think that you can tack them, between the tackles or deep downfield. Like they're susceptible all over the place. Do you think this is another just like don't overthink it at all? Just like plug Rico Dowdle in and just, expect a huge game type of week?
Oh, you have to. I mean, this Dallas defense, it's not stopped anybody. So I think you have to have that expectation. That's the way that Panthers want to function on offense. And I think that the
Right.
only big concern, and even last week it would have, you thought it would have been a concern, but it ended up not being a concern, is that the Cowboys can just get up on the Panthers and eliminate that run
Hmm.
game, because we've seen teams do that. We saw Arizona in week 2 get up on the Panthers and put them into a throw position. But the Dallas defense is bad enough that hopefully Bryce Young is going from the start of this game and doesn't take like half the game off before starting to get rolling. But that's probably maybe the only concern. Other than that, this is the way that the Panthers want to play. They have a very good offensive line. They want to run the ball. Rico Dowdle is a huge part of that. Throughout the offseason, they were talking about a split between him and Chuba Hubbard, and sometimes you just need one opportunity to show, and then offenses are going to build themselves differently. So I think that's where we are with Dowdle. You're plugging him in. I mean, it's, for me, I think I'm probably going to end up with him being a top 12 running back once I have full clearance that Chuba Hubbard is out this week.
Yeah, I've got him as my RB 15 right now, operating under the assumption that Chuba Hubbard won't play. I think one other, not a super like deep cut storyline, but I'm excited to see Bryce Young with his full arsenal of receivers. We've seen them really patchworking that wide receiver 3, whether it be Hunter Renfro or Bryson Tremaine or whoever they can kind of get out there. And I think now that, this is the first time all year that we're going to see Tedero McMillan, Xavier Legette, and Jalen Coker, like 3 big time playmakers. So, I'm rooting for Bryce Young. I want to see him turn it around after what we saw over the second half of last season, and hoping this can be a get
Yeah,
right spot for
and
him.
having those 3 receivers, it's levels. It's just, think about the passing
Yeah.
game in levels, and you've got Jalen Coker is that guy that
Oh,
they
you
didn't have
got
the guy that can take it vertically, and Jalen Coker is just
right.
amazing. His Holy Cross tape was so much fun because it was literally just, I think he caught 7 Hail Marys like his last year. It was like they would just chuck the ball up and Coker would go get it. And so he brings that element, which allows Tedero and McMillan to work in the intermediate element, which I think is the best area for him. It's like, think about Nico
And then
Collins.
Leggett is that underneath like Quentin Johnston from last year with the
Yeah.
Chargers. I mean, yeah, it like just makes so much sense schematically how these 3 work off of each other. And that's what like I said, it just hasn't really felt right when you have like Hunter Renfro and Bryson Tremaine running the same routes and then like nobody able to get deep. Like now it feels like they have a formidable trio rather than just like, well, these are the 3 guys that are healthy. Let's put them out there and see how it happens.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this, because Jatavian Sanders being active was not on my radar, and so now it is. But at the same time, I think that we've seen Mitchell Evans, the rookie, come in, make some plays, made the game-winning touchdown last week. We've seen
Yeah.
Tommy Tremble have a big game. I think you're going to get some rotation out of the tight ends, whereas the
Mhm.
receivers, I think there will be less rotation. You'll kind of get those 3 core guys out there.
Arizona Cardinals going to Indianapolis to face off against the red hot Colts. They are looking great so far this season. Kyler Murray, dealing with a foot injury, has yet to practice this week. We haven't officially heard that he has been declared out, but it sure seems like it's trending in that direction. There's been a lot of talk about Jacoby Brissett taking over as the starter this week. Alec Pierce still dealing with this concussion, but practicing in full. We'll hope to see him back out there after missing the last couple of games. So, Jeff, what are you going to be watching specifically in this one? I know we talked a lot about Michael Carter in shows earlier this week. I think that he has kind of earned that role while Trey Benson is out. I think the takeaway is like, what can we expect from Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride with Jacoby Brissett under center as opposed to Kyler Murray?
Yeah, from the Arizona aspect, man, if Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback, like, this whole offense feels like a stay away. You've got, if this feels, you talked about in your article, inflection points on the Cardinals letting that game get away last week. And we know this is a very tight NFC West race. And so that you lose that Titans game, that makes you feel like we're out of it. We don't have our quarterback this week.
Mhm.
I think obviously the quarterback's the most interesting thing to watch from Arizona. The other interesting thing is Marvin Harrison going to Indianapolis. Marvin Harrison Jr. going to Indianapolis, where
Yeah.
he was raised. I don't know if he was born in Indianapolis, but certainly the Colts were a massive part of his childhood.
I
So
imagine he had to have been. I mean, Marvin Harrison Sr. was playing on the Colts 22, 23 years ago. So I imagine that that's where he was born.
Yeah, we can double check that real quick, so just so we have our facts straight. But I think it's just these little things. He was born actually in Philadelphia, so that's where Marvin Harrison came from. So that's not shocking, but it's these little things. And last week I'm remiss because I missed it, but David Montgomery going to Cincinnati was a big deal
Mhm.
on that one, and I don't think we mentioned it at all when we did the show. And so trying to be cognizant, and looking for these things. But that game is probably going to mean a lot to Marvin Harrison Jr. It's just that if Jacoby Brissett's the quarterback, is he able to get it rolling?
Yeah. And then I think for the Colts, I don't think there's any huge takeaways here. Like Jonathan Taylor, red hot, you're starting him. Daniel Jones, red hot, you're starting him. Michael Pittman just seems to keep finding the touchdown every single week. He's a good guy to put in your lineup. And then Tyler Warren has just been unbelievable. I think that we're looking at, a little bit Adonai Mitchell and Alec Pierce here and there, but we kind of know who the core pieces are in this offense. And that's Daniel Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren. Those are guys that you're firing up with confidence and not even thinking twice about.
Well, we saw Adonai Mitchell get benched last week for Ashton Dulin, and Ashton Dulin took that
Right.
starting spot, and so Alec Pierce is going to
Now
right back
Alec Pierce
into
is
there.
back this week,
Yep.
and yeah, so it's just been a rotation at that outside receiver spot. And I do Josh Downs, is he kind of back on the radar now? I mean, we've seen him; he is still stuck in that slot role where he doesn't come on the field for two wide receiver sets. But when he is on the field, target rate has been great, and he is still the twitched up guy that can make defenders miss after the catch, doing all the fun things. I mean, it's the same conversation we have with Jaden Reed and these other guys that are just glued to the slot, like really fun on a per route run metric. But when you're only playing 55 to 65% of the snaps, it does make it kind of tough to put him in your lineup. And looking at this matchup against Arizona, I don't know if they're going to be doing a lot of three wide receiver sets. They might just try to run it down their throat all game.
Yeah, and I think last week's the concern is the biggest thing with that because we saw Josh Downs be very, very involved early. And I think that had the
Mhm.
Raiders been able to push the Colts at all, maybe last week would have been that breakout game that we've been waiting for Josh Downs. But because that game just got out of hand, they didn't need to go that direction at all. And he got unplugged. So I think that that's a good under the radar call out that maybe, in some shallower leagues, maybe Josh Downs has hit the waiver wire, or maybe in a dynasty league that might be a situation. Again, if you're a rebuilder looking for a player that could rebound some value, I think Josh Downs might be a good target to go after right now because we saw that early intentional usage and then it fell apart because they didn't need it to go anymore. But with Michael Pittman Jr. coming in, making the injury report, but then clearing last week, I think that was part of the game planning of like, okay, let's get Downs going with Pierce out. That said, I think Pierce is going to be, downfield shots are going to be open for Pierce. You just have to be cognizant of the way the Colts are playing, what they did to the Raiders, and the opportunity for the passing game to just be put on ice earlier in this game than you would like.
Seattle Seahawks, the Jacksonville Jaguars. All the Seahawks players that we care about are healthy, so that's good to hear. Diami Brown dealing with a shoulder injury has been limited in practice. Baishal Tutin also dealing with a shoulder injury has been limited in practice. Jeff, this is another one where it's like a pretty consolidated offense, and we're seeing like little flashes from Elijah Arroyo and AJ Barner. They're getting involved, but this is one JSN is the very clear wide receiver one here. Cooper Cup, I mean, I hate to say it, but just like not enough to really feel comfortable putting him in your lineup there. And then I think when you look at Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker, I mean, it's frustrating seeing a split backfield, but this team runs the ball enough, and you can just kind of count on Ken Walker getting his 100 scrimmage yards and Zach Charbonnet getting his 30 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, and they both end up being viable flex plays every single week.
Yeah, viable flex plays. That's exactly the way to say it. And if you were the person that drafted Zach Charbonnet, you're thrilled that it's a viable flex play. If you're the person that drafted Kenneth Walker, you are in shambles that it's a flex play, and that's kind of breaking that out. But Sam Darnold's play has been a revelation. It's been really great to see him just so comfortable here in
Mhm.
Clinton Kubiak's scheme and just take this and run. You kind of mentioned AJ Barner as like AJ Barner, I think, is more than a tertiary piece. Like he's really stepped up last week, but really kind of started to step up the last couple of weeks. He's 80% snap share, 86% the week before that, and 85, 89%. He's out there almost every single play. He's really taken off as their every down tight end, and especially Dynasty brain, but just in general, there's so much excitement about Elijah Arroyo because it's an interesting package. But he's more of a slot wide receiver filling into tight end, trying to figure that
Right.
out. And Barner is like, It's not George
That's
Kittle,
funny.
but like,
Everyone loves Arroyo because he's the rookie. Like, Barner's a 23-year-old year two player. It's not like he's this dusty veteran that we should be hating on. Like, he's still a young guy who is ascending as well, but is like he's not quite as young. And he's been in the league for 2 years instead of 1. So,
well,
his career's over, unfortunately. Like, story is written.
you look at like Rashad White and Ramondre Stevenson, Dave. I'm old enough to remember
Yes.
when we were pounding the table for young Rashad White and young Ramondre Stevenson to get more run in their backfields, and now it's like they're the old guys that are ruining everything.
What are they doing giving this ball to a dusty Damian Harris? Don't they know they've got Ramondre
Yes,
Stevenson, a young
exactly.
stud out there? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I think
remember
Barner
as
is
well.
just a really interesting under the radar thing because of what you mentioned. But just I think people don't. Mike, I'm gonna pick on him a little bit, but he's done a fantastic job this week. But Mike Kashuba, in our group chat that we've got rolling on, 2 weeks ago, I hit the AJ Barner first touchdown scorer on Thursday Night Football, and then Mike was like, "Why would you even play that? Like, I was like, how do you even go there?" And I was like, "Well, dude, he's like the starting tight end that plays like almost every single snap. Like, it's
And
gotta
the odds were what,
recognize."
like
The
3,500,
odds
I
were
imagine?
astronomical, yeah, and it was
Yeah.
on the, I had the anytime touchdown to hit the FanDuel, jackpot as well, so that was a lot of fun that week, but, that's the thing of, like, I think that and Mike so the point of picking on Mike was, well, I don't think he's any good, so, like, he wasn't on my radar, and it's like, I think he's pretty kinda good, and it's, Michigan
He's a
tight
full-time
end.
player on a good offense.
Yeah, exactly, in an offense that there's opportunity for targets outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba.
And I do want to contextualize this as we're talking about AJ Barner because, like, I get what you're saying, full time player, good offense, but there are a lot of full time tight ends on decent offenses. So, like, when I'm doing my rankings, I can't get him ahead of tight end 23. And I don't know where you're at on him, but like when I look at the guys directly ahead of him, Cole Kmet, Evan Ingram, Theo Johnson, who played last night, Mark Andrews, Jake Tongas, Harold Fannin, Hunter Long. Like, I like AJ Barner and I understand what you're saying. He's on the field, he can score touchdowns occasionally, but he is kind of outside of that flex consideration for me at the moment when you look at so many of the other guys right now that are performing well.
How many targets do you have last week, Dave?
I think 7.
Yeah, he had 7 targets last week. So
Yeah.
I think it's the opportunities there, and I think the other part of this passing game is Cooper Cup is like it's either here or there. Like you've got these 2 games with 9 targets, and then you've got these other games like 3 targets, and it seems to be. It's just that Seattle's been so good defensively and able to lean on the run in some of these matchups and have Smith and Jigba that if the Jacksonville should be able to push them, especially this game being on the road in Jacksonville. I mean, I think Jacksonville's even favored. So if Seattle's in a back and forth game, you've got pieces here. I think with Cooper Cup and AJ Barner is probably more my main point that are a little bit off the radar, but there's a lot of danger there on the way that these Seahawks games have gone.
Yeah, and you look, it's just like the Seahawks, they've really been establishing the run and winning games that way. And through the first 4 weeks, it was 16 completions, 22 completions, 14 completions, 18 completions. Like Sam Darnold didn't really have to throw the ball all that much. And then last week we saw in a close game against the Bucks, he was forced to air it out, and we ended up seeing a season high 28 completions, completing over 82% of his passes, 4 touchdowns. I mean, the underlying metrics told us when you're looking at the EPA and the completion percentage over expectation and all these things that like Sam Darnold was cooking through the first month of the season. And then you finally have to expand that passing pie a little bit. And it's like, oh yeah, Sam Darnold, top 3 quarterback on the week. He can do it when he needs
Yeah.
to, but we'll see how this one goes. Any major takeaways from the Jaguars, Jeff?
I think just maybe building some positive momentum for Brian Thomas, but this is
Mm,
it's one that this is an interesting game because both of these teams, the defenses have been better than expected to good defenses, and it's like one of those things of, do you think Trevor Lawrence and Sam Darnold going up against good defenses, how's that going to end? But at the same time, these offenses have been effective, and the Jaguars, we saw them get taken out of the run game last week. Both of these teams want to run the
yep,
ball badly, but Chiefs got up
right.
14-0, and it
And
was
both defenses want to stop the run badly.
yes.
So what happens when a stoppable force meets a movable object?
Yeah, but I think on Brian Thomas, just the bigger point is how many targets we saw in that Cincinnati game that was just a train wreck of a game, and how much I wonder if Liam Cohen had kind of like to take him in and basically say, you're my guy, like let's build this up a little bit more. Instead of like hammering you with 12 targets and then letting whatever happens, let's start to ramp you. Let's get you to a place you're comfortable in. Let's get everything settled and let's get you start rolling and ramping. And we're going to get to a couple of these teams here, but just like for an example of a guy of like through 5 games last year, where do you think Josh Jacobs was in scoring, half PPR scoring?
I believe he was the RB1, right?
Through 5 games,
Yeah.
Josh
No?
Jacobs
Am
was
I
running
wrong?
back 23 through 5 games
Oh
last
my
year.
gosh. I thought I
And he
remember him getting off
finished
to a hot start.
running back
All
6.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and you look at it last week too. I like the usage for Brian Thomas Jr. because we talked about it that it felt like it was kind of like a square peg in a round hole sort of thing where they were asking him to cross these like crossers where he can create after the catch and getting the ball through traffic, and that's not who Brian Thomas is. And then last week we saw a lot more boundary shots, letting him work outside the numbers, getting one-on-one man coverage and hitting him deep downfield, and that's where I want to see Brian Thomas Jr. getting his opportunities. So hopefully he can carry that over into this matchup. Jeff, Los Angeles Chargers at Miami Dolphins. Keenan Allen getting a rest day because he is old and he deserves those at this point in his career. Quentin Johnston has a hamstring thing, but he is limited throughout practice. No indication that he won't be ready to go this weekend. Darren Waller also getting a rest day on Wednesday, limited on Thursday. No concern that he won't be ready to go either. And then Tua Tagovailoa also getting a limited practice on Wednesday, dealing with a hip and a left thumb injury, but nothing serious. He was back to a full participation on Friday, so doesn't look like anybody impactful is going to be missing this game. I think the takeaway, Jeff, is that this is a tough one because on one hand, the Chargers have looked very mortal over the last couple of weeks. No Rashawn Slater, no Joe Alt, no Omari and Hampton. I mean, this offense is so beat up. But on the flip side, playing the Miami Dolphins, and we have seen lesser teams that have beat up Chargers offense just absolutely trounce this Miami team. So I could see this going either way, like where the Chargers struggles continue as they're missing some of their key pieces, or this just being a, hey, even though we're beat up, we're playing Miami. Let's just go out there and run it up on them. I don't really have a clear read on this game, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's a West Coast team that's struggling a little bit going east for a 1 p.m. game, a very long trip against a team that really they know that their back's against the wall. And so that's kind of what I see there. But I mean, this Chargers team, again, inflection points. It's you sitting 2 weeks ago, they saw an East Coast trip like this and they went into the Giants. They were 3-0. They felt like they were going to run away with that division. Now they've lost 2 straight and now they need to get reset and get going. The running backs are a big issue there, where that's going to break down. And I think we talked about it earlier in the week, but you're kind of hoping for a touchdown if you play Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vidal. I think it's having a stance on either is a little bit aggressive at this point, but yeah, I think you can play either of them in hopes that they do get a touchdown. That's in play. I think it's interesting because I saw a point somebody had made on Twitter, and I don't remember who it was, and I'm not calling that person out by any means, but they were pointing to the targets that Marion Hampton got the last couple of weeks and saying, the Chargers want to throw it to the running back. And I think that's one of the things of like just differences in the game that we're playing, the analysis that we're trying to do is I don't think they want to throw it to the running back. I think they were fine throwing it to Marion Hampton.
They want to find ways to get the ball to Omari and Hampton.
Yes.
They don't want to find ways to get the ball to Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins, especially when they've got the wide receiver trio that they have.
Yes, but then I think the wide receiver conversation is interesting because I know I saw in your rest of season ranks, I think you had Keenan Allen maybe like wide receiver 23. I know he's like in scoring like wide receiver 19 right now. He had 3 touchdowns the first 3 weeks. And then the last 2 weeks, he's been wide receiver 40. He's not hitting big plays downfield, and he's limited in that capacity. You've got Johnson and you've got Lad McConkey able to hit big plays downfield. So I do think that Keenan Allen strikes me as a player that has had some unsustainable production, has pushed him into the wide receiver 2 conversation that I don't know that I think that the way I see this Chargers offense going. And I threw out that nugget about Josh Jacobs because I wanted to have open up some of these conversations here, because we feel like 5 games in, we know what we have now. And if you think you look through 5 games, and I'll start to sprinkle some more in, we didn't know what we had last year through 5 games. And the way that the season turned, that was the biggest thing. I don't see Ladd McConkey being this player all year long. Basically, that's going to be
Neither
like
do I. Yeah.
40 yards and 5 receptions and like hardly
I do want to say,
involved.
if you look at my rest of season rankings, I just kind of have all of the Chargers receivers clustered
Yeah.
together as like back end wide receiver twos.
And I think that's fair, but I think when you look at them, you've got McConkey and Johnston are playing every single snap. We know that
Mhm.
they can be involved all over the field from what we've seen from Johnston so far, but knowing Ladd McConkey, I tend to believe that it's going to normalize a little bit, and you're going to see Ladd McConkey start to be more of that wide receiver one, and then Johnston able to hit big plays, but also we want to get the ball in his hands. And I think that as we get outside of small sample sizes, it's going to realize that Keenan Allen he's a very legitimate red zone threat. Like Justin Herbert's very comfortable going to him there, but I think that there's been some unsustainability boosting Allen up. He's a player that I mentioned Matt Waldman in the roundtable this week that I was able to contribute to. Matt had said basically, who's a player that you think can fall a tier or two versus where they're valued right now? And Keenan Allen was my call out there. If he's consensusly being valued as a wide receiver 2 right now, I think he settles more as a wide receiver 3 type player.
My pushback, Jeff, and this is just like really just like dumbed down analysis, but sometimes we just need to look at it that way. He's averaging 9 targets per game. Like even over the last 2 weeks where he hasn't scored a touchdown, he still pulled 16 targets and caught 10 balls. I mean, sometimes you just do have to look at the raw production and like the raw numbers. And I understand what you're saying, but I think this is still going to be a high volume passing attack as we've seen this year. I think all of these
Yeah.
guys, what you're looking at is like, yeah, there's going to be boom weeks and there's going to be bust weeks for all three of them. But I think that like once we hit the end of the season, I think all of these guys are going to finish within the top 30 because we just see Justin Herbert spreading it around and they are all pulling volume. So I get what you're saying, but Keenan Allen, man, 1,200 yards just 2 years ago. He was the number one receiver for the Bears last year when he was on the field. So I think there's still some juice in that tank.
Yeah.
And like you said, he is a reliable red zone threat as well. But let's talk about the Dolphins. And we don't need to talk about a lot of the Dolphins. You're starting Jalen Waddle. You're starting Devon Achane. Let's talk about Darren Waller. Pull up your tight end rankings, Jeff, because I want to compare. I'll show you mine if you show me yours. I got Darren Waller as my tight end 8 on the week, which is probably more of an indictment on the tight end landscape as a whole. But I mean, looking at the usage that he's getting, like deep post screens, schemed up touches at the goal line, I don't know what more you could ask for a tight end.
Now I'm fascinated to know who you've got, because he's my tight end 9, and I feel pretty strong he's my tight end 9. So
I've got him ahead of Hunter Henry, ahead of Zach Ertz, ahead of Mason Taylor, foolishly ahead of Dallas Goedert after
okay,
what we saw
that's the
last
missing
night.
name, because I had Dallas Goedert. I
Yeah.
had Dallas Goedert above him. So that I was going to
Dallas
say,
Goedert, it's making me so mad, dude. He just keeps getting these like schemed up goal line touches every single week that make me look like an idiot, but it isn't gonna stop, it seems like.
well, and I mean the volume last night, 9 receptions,
Yeah.
110, and that's one that it's. I think we thought we knew what we had with Dallas Goedert, and it's maybe a good lesson on new offensive coordinators. But it seemed to be of traditionally, you got AJ Brown, you got Devontae Smith, they get all the targets. Goddard occasionally can do something, but if one of them out, Goddard takes off. It seems like Goddard has stepped in as the 2 there. But anyways,
Also, you remember when we were doing our training camp show, when we were doing those like mega 2.5 hour episodes every single week in training camp, every single week we just heard this consistent drumbeat like Dallas Goedert looks unbelievable. Dallas Goedert is primed for a career year. Dallas Goedert looks like the best pass catcher in Philadelphia. And we talked about it every week, but we're like, it's going to be a low volume offense. They've got AJ Brown, they've got Devonta Smith. That's good for Dallas Goedert that he looks good. But like we weren't really buying into it. And like Jason Wood, who does these write-ups for the Philadelphia Eagles, was telling us every single week, like Dallas Goedert is looking really, really, really good. And we just kind of ignored it.
well, I yes and no, because so you know me, I'm the king of big ridiculous futures bets, and so I have
Yep.
a little big future round robin that where I've built it to multiple layers for 5 touchdowns scored, and I have Dallas Goedert, I have Emeka Ibuka, I have Jake Ferguson is in that. The one that's holding me down right now is Mike Gesicki, is killing me. So maybe Joe Flacco can breathe some life. We'll get to there, but I think that's where we're talking about the Eagles when we're talking about the Dolphins. Anyways, so the point that I wanted to make on the Dolphins, though, through week 5 last year, where
Mhm.
do you think Jonnu Smith was on tight end ranks?
I can't remember. I know he finished the year strong, and I wanna say he started hot and then cooled off a little bit, but I don't remember as well as I should.
Tight end
I'm gonna
20,
guess
tight end
tight
22
end 7. Oh,
through
alright,
5 weeks.
alright.
We
And then
saw the player that he became. And then the other question I have is, where do you think Devin Achane was in running back ranks through 5 weeks last year?
I feel like I should know this. I think he was red hot to start the year. I think that was when we saw the change in usage where he was catching a lot of balls, but I could be totally wrong. I see you smirking. You're setting me up to look dumb, and you're doing it time and time again.
Well,
Wide
you're
receiver
picking up on, you're
31.
not picking up on the
R
theme. He was running
Running back 31
back
is what I'm gonna
19.
say.
So running back
Alright.
19. And we know both of these guys ended up being top 5 players at their positions. So just again, it's like looking at this and having some context on where we sit in the season and how much things can still change.
Mhm. Cleveland Browns at Pittsburgh Steelers, battle of the AFC North. This is going to be a fun one. David Njoku is practicing in full with a knee injury. DK Metcalf got a rest day on Thursday, but he's going to be out there. Calvin Austin not practicing with a shoulder injury. And then for the Steelers, we've also got Jalen Warren back at practice in a full capacity here. So, Jeff, let's start talking about the Steelers backfield. And again, Mike Kashuba, his name just keeps coming up on today's show, but we've been talking with him a lot this week. Mike Kashuba is a Steelers fan, and I had him on the launch pad this week to do our matchup preview episode, and we talked about this game, and he made such a good point because I said, Kenneth Gainwell, we saw it, like genie's out of the bottle, 3 touchdowns, looks absolutely great in this performance last week over in Europe. Do we expect him to maintain his role? And he said, no, that's not what Mike Tomlin does. Like, Mike Tomlin is the guy who, like, if you're the starter and you earn that role, you're going to keep that role. And then I went back to last year with Justin Fields, who was winning games, but as soon as Russell Wilson was healthy and able, they put him back in there, even, cutting off their nose to spite their face. Like, Mike Tomlin will do that just to maintain loyalty to his players. So he said, no, I expect this to go immediately back to Jalen Warren because he won the job in camp. And Kenneth Gainwell is going to go back to his role, just getting a handful of touches here and there to spell Jalen Warren. Is that kind of your read on this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mike Tomlin called Jalen Warren his feature back. I think that Gainwell or definitely earned some trust as part of it, but I think he has
Yeah.
some trust too. He's a guy that you know what he's going to give you. I think it's. I mean, if anything, it really just kills. Why am I blanking on the rookie's name?
Caleb Johnson.
Caleb Johnson. I think it just really just eliminates.
I picked him up in a deep 14-teamer the other day because, why not? But yeah, it doesn't feel like there's much happening here.
Yeah, I think you're going to have Jalen Warren trending towards a feature back role, and they feel comfortable plugging Kenneth Gainwell in. But I do think I'm very hesitant on these veterans that we know Kenneth Gainwell, we know what he is, and we can see these veterans can step in and have big games occasionally, but more often than not, over time they would settle into what they've traditionally been over their career. It would be a little bit different if it's like a young player that came out of nowhere and you're like, okay, let's see if we can build on this and we've got something here to unlock. You feel pretty comfortable with what Kenneth Gainwell has established as a baseline for his career, but also Jalen Warren, I think is getting lost a little bit because of Gainwell's performance. He was really trending up and really playing very, very well
Yeah.
before he missed that game, and that can't be ignored.
Like a true workhorse. Like
Yes.
it wasn't just like, touchdown cologne or anything like that. Like he was out here just like as a true workhorse and looking really good. So yeah, just to like I think perfectly kind of like portray where we're at in fantasy land right now. I've got Jalen Warren one spot behind Derrick Henry in my rankings this week.
Yeah, I think that you're on the right place there. I think there are 2 big things that I'm going to be watching here for the Steelers. One, Darnell Washington, we saw him become really a
Mhm.
full-time player against the Vikings. And so whether or not that was schemed or if they're going to settle into him kind of just being on the field all the time and then rotating around
Did
him
you
with the
hear
tight ends.
Did you hear Tomlin's comments about that? It was, like, shocking how transparent Tomlin was. Like, he said, "When we're playing against 4-3 defenses, we need Darnell Washington out there because of what he can do as a blocker, and when we're playing against 3-4 defenses, that's when we want Pat Freiermuth out there as a pass catcher." So it's just like, wow, he just showed us all of his cards. There's no guessing here. Like, when they're playing against defenses that wanna load the box, we're gonna see, Darnell Washington out there, and let me guess, Jeff, going up against the Cleveland Browns, they are a 4-3 defense, so we're going to see a lot of Darnell Washington in this matchup, right?
Who's on that edge for the Cleveland Browns?
Exactly. They're gonna want Darnell Washington chipping Myles
That
Garrett
dude.
every single chance they can. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that that's going to be a thing to watch there. And I mean, Pat Fryermuth had fallen off radars anyways, but I think
But a lot of that
Washington.
is and that's why they asked him. They said, like, "Why hasn't Freiermuth been involved?" Because we saw the early season involvement, and that's why he just came out and bluntly said it, like, "If we're playing a 3-4 team or a 4-3 team, that's gonna dictate our personnel and which tight ends we wanna lean on."
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I'm watching is DK Metcalf coming out of this bye here, and we saw that. I mean, a career high in yardage against the Vikings in the first half there, and a lot of it was one big play. But that being said, the Vikings are the number one defense against. Have allowed the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, and we know how important Aaron Rodgers being on the same page with his receivers and just kind of that intuitive flow. And we saw very, very early where there was some instances where DK Metcalf and Rodgers weren't on the same page. And what is building now of like that performance against the Vikings, having that bye, having that chance to reset, having some bonding time, having some time to learn and to understand each other. Because I think naturally we should get to a place where DK Metcalf gets targeted very heavily as part of this offense. Because when you look at the other pieces around there, it's just like you've got DK Metcalf over here and everything else is kind of over here to some extent. And so you naturally a flow of a cohesive NFL offense is going to target that guy. And I think that DK Metcalf is a really underrated player to grow with Aaron Rodgers over the next portion of the year. I mean, the Browns are a difficult matchup on defense, and we might just see a slobber knocker of a game in the AFC North. But I think that both these teams, I mean, the as much as we talk about the running backs, the Steelers are going to rely on the pass with Aaron Rodgers, and I think DK Metcalf is kind of an underrated acquisition out there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I would like to see the target volume trend up a little bit, but I think that there's gonna be some self-scouting after that game 2 weeks ago and after the bye week and saying like, "Oh, that's right. We traded all of this away for DK Metcalf, and he is the biggest, strongest, fastest guy on the field. Let's get him the ball as often as we can." So I do expect some of that to change a little bit. Last game in the early afternoon slate,
Can we
New
talk
England
about the
Patriots.
Browns really quick? Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, we know what we have with Quinshon Judkins. Just how much of last week's game to the tight ends was game planning against the Brian Flores defense with a quarterback that is making his first career start, and how much of it is their concern with Dylan Gabriel getting the ball outside of the numbers? I think is where some of that I'm interested to see coming in with the Browns offense.
I mean, I think Quinshon Judkins is very much the real deal. Like, I think he looks like one of the best running backs in football. I had somebody reach out to me yesterday, just a guy on Twitter that I'm helping out with as I get these DMs often. And he said, "Hey, I've got this offer on the table right now where I can get either Derrick Henry, Brees Hall, or Quinshon Judkins." I said, "This might sound crazy, but I prefer Quinshon Judkins of the bunch." I mean, we're just looking at a guy right now who's getting 20 opportunities per game, looks amazing with his touches as well. And I think that having that sort of running back alleviates a lot of the stress for Dylan Gabriel when you got a guy that you can give the ball and he's just going to confidently pick up 4 or 5 yards every single week. So that's where I am with Quinshon Judkins. I don't know if I'm, a little over my skis here, but I imagine you're there as well.
Yeah, I am, and it's something that we've had these dynasty listener leagues that are going on, and I have Judkins in those leagues, in a couple of those leagues, and it's Judkins is not a buy low. To be clear, people out there, like you missed your window. You had an amazing window to buy Quinshon Judkins low. You missed your window. So the idea that you can buy Quinshon Judkins low right now, no, you're paying full freight and more if you want to buy
I
Quinshon
mean, give
Judkins.
me one reason to say that he's not a top 5, top 6 dynasty running
Right.
back
I
because I
can't.
can't really think about it. Like, I mean, he's up there for me with Ashton Jinty and Omarion Hampton based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly where I think he should be. He's looked fantastic, and yeah, even uh, elevating around the not so great circumstances in Cleveland. Like, this is not a great Cleveland offense, and he is still producing and still looking good. I love to see that. New England Patriots at New Orleans Saints. I'm Ron Burgundy. I just read the injury reports here. I don't know why the Patriots are doing it this way. They haven't placed Antonio Gibson on IR despite a reported torn ACL. They're just putting him on the injury report saying DNP with a knee injury, but we know that Antonio Gibson, I'm sorry, ACL torn. He won't play again this year for the Saints. We've got Alvin Kamara limited with an ankle injury. We've also got Juwan Johnson limited with an ankle injury. Jeff, we talked a lot about this backfield on Wednesday show. We talked about the Patriots, and we never like to see injuries, but this does at least clear the picture up for us a little bit where like this was very much so a like 33 split between Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson, and Antonio Gibson. With Gibson out of the picture, now we expect more of a 50-50 split between Ramondre and Travion, and that's exactly what we saw when Gibson exited the game.
I feel like this is really interesting that we have this matchup when we're talking about running backs because I'll make a point here in a minute, but you got Travion Henderson here, and you got this weird thing with Antonio Gibson, why he's not on IR, and it's like they're playing like mind games with Travion Henderson. It feels like at this point of like it's like it almost feels like Vrabel's just saying like don't think I'll throw Antonio Gibson out there with no knee at all, like it's like I don't even know what's going on. And it's interesting because they're playing the Saints and we're seeing Kendry Miller here. And Kendry Miller got to a place where he was such in Dennis Allen's doghouse that it was like
Yeah.
and I think you probably in life you run into these situations, your workplace or any part in life where no matter what you do is going to be the wrong thing to do. And I feel like
Mhm.
Kendry Miller was like at the place where no matter what he did was the wrong thing to do. And so it didn't matter what Kendry Miller did. It feels like right now with the Patriots coaches, Travion Henderson is in that place where no matter what Travion Henderson's going to do, it's the wrong thing to do. And that can really wear and tear down a young player. And I mean, I think some of it's old school coaching philosophy with Vrabel and that. And I think that Vrabel probably sees greatness in Travion Henderson and is just trying to get it to a place where it needs to come out. And me being the Ohio State guy, I know there's ties with Vrabel to Ohio State, with
Yep.
Henderson with Ohio State. Like there's if it were really at a bad place, there are people in both of these people's lives that would intervene and like straighten some things out probably. So I don't really think it is. I think it's a hard coaching philosophy that sees greatness in Travion Henderson and is trying to get him to a place to get it out, is kind of what I see going on here with the Patriots backfield.
Yeah, and also just like the Belichickian tendencies that run deep through this coaching staff with Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. Like they are going to be old school coaches. They're going to coach these players hard. They're going to split the backfield. They're going to have these slow ramp up periods for rookies. Like we should have kind of seen this coming before the season kicked off. But I don't know if you saw, like there was a reporter, and I can't remember who it was. They like asked, they're like, so like in lieu of the Antonio Gibson injury, are we going to see more touches going to Travion Henderson now? And Vrabel's response, he was like, we just need to get Ramondre Stevenson to stop fumbling the ball because he's such an important part of what we want to do and the identity of our run game and all this sort of stuff. And like, even when specifically asked about Travion Henderson, he's like, it's Ramondre Stevenson. Let me tell you about him. So, I mean, there's definitely some coaching going on here, I think, but definitely, I've had, because I drafted a lot of Travion Henderson in both Dynasty and redraft, and I've had a lot of people knocking on my door like, hey, willing to sell Travion Henderson. I'm not there yet. We're 5 weeks into the season. We just saw one of these guys in the backfield go down. I still have faith that he can be that second half of the season guy who really kind of breaks out here. And we did see that too. Like if you look back at the overall numbers from the first year that Vrabel was in Tennessee, it was a split between Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry, but in the second half of the season, talent won out, and Derrick Henry just strung together, a league-winning type of season here, and I think that's what I'm hoping for with Travion Henderson as well.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about these backs is I think that we were just in the wrong place when it came to Henderson, viewing him as like a souped up version of James White, because there was just a couple things there where um, the Tom Brady offense is very different than the Drake May offense. And so much of James White was Tom Brady quickly diagnosing a defense and then saying, okay, White, this one's you. Like, let's hit that dagger route. We know that's going to be there. You be in your spot, like hit him and just kind of go with that. And that's not going to be there on a Drake May offense, where May can extend plays in ways that Brady never could, attack outside of the
Yep.
pocket. Those quarterback dump downs are just not going to be schemed into here. I think that, we can definitely see Travion Henderson make plays downfield off of wheel routes, things like that. But I think this idea of the very split backfield that we had with, like Ben Jarvis Green Ellis is never allowed to be throwing the ball, and James White is never allowed to run the ball. I think they view these running backs, one, they play them
Yeah.
both at the same time sometimes, but I think they view
Mhm.
both of them as interchangeable in terms of they can affect all areas of the game. It's going to be more of a like series type split as opposed to a but we've also seen the league trend that direction. The league has moved
Right.
a way away from these specialist backs into you've got to be able to do it all to be on the field, because we don't want to give away to the defense what we're going to do.
And you're spot on there. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson had that like huge wheel route catch a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and they asked Vrabel about that, and they said, that was actually a play that we drew up for Travion in practice this week, and then we just decided to plug Ramondre Stevenson in there. So I do think they see these guys as very interchangeable, both versatile backs who can do a lot of different things.
Travion looked at me
Let's move on.
weird, and
Yeah.
so I benched him. So like, so I ran that with Ramonde just so I could show Travion this is what you could be doing if you didn't look at me weird. I
And
think
Ramondre
the
and
final
Travion Henderson probably would have house called that one too if he was given the opportunity, but Ramondre Stevenson chased down. And
the
what you said about Quinshon Judkins, like that buy window slam close, like stop reaching out to me trying to buy Quinshon Judkins. That's where I am with Travion or with I'm sorry, with Kendra Miller. I've held on to this guy for 2.5 years in almost every single dynasty league. I've had like a dozen people sending me offers for my Kendra Miller shares, and it's like, no, I held on to this guy for 2.5 years. It seems like his time is finally here. I am not selling now. So stop trying.
Yeah, real one final point on the Patriots. So just an example of where beat reports can be wrong is looking at there were so many reports that came towards the end of the offseason where it was kind of like, well, Stephon Diggs is like a part-time player. There's a lot of packages that Stephon Diggs is not on the field. And that's true. There are a lot of packages where Stephon Diggs is not on the field. They play like 50% of the snaps, and they're kind of ramping him up still a little bit, but it didn't matter. And I don't think it matters right
Right.
now. And I think Diggs is a player that, I mean, you really break this down, top 15 wide receiver rest of the season. Where are you with Diggs on the rest of the season?
I don't have my rest of season rankings pulled up right now. I'm going to ramble as I try to pull them up, but I think I've got him inside my. So rest of season rankings is tough because he started at like wide receiver 48, and I've got to like incrementally move him up. So I've got him like just inside my top 35 there. But on the week, and I'm going to keep moving Stephon Diggs up. It's kind of one of those like rest of season rankings are a little bit tricky, but on the week, Stephon Diggs is my wide receiver 14.
Why do you have to incrementally move him up? Like, if you think he's going to be wide receiver 14 this week and you view him as a top 15 wide receiver, why does he have to climb to get to that point? Why don't you just make him top 15 wide receiver?
Because we've seen 2 good games and we've seen 3 bad games, and the guys that I have ahead of him in rest of season rankings right now, like, I think you'd be here with me. Like, the guys that I have directly ahead of him, Rashee Rice, Lad McConkey, Devonta Smith, Courtland Sutton, Michael Pittman. Would you trade any of those guys right now for Stephon Diggs? Because I'd start Stephon Diggs ahead of them, but I don't think I'd want to trade Stephon Diggs away for any of them, if
I
that
mean,
makes
I would
sense.
trade Devonta Smith for Stephon Diggs in redraft right now. I think it's
Devonta Smith is maybe the one, and he's been a slow faller, and Stephon Diggs has been a steady riser. And I gotta say, man, these rest of season rankings are hard because it is
it
very
is
much so like trying to abandon pre-draft priors while also looking ahead, and it's been a fun exercise for me. But yeah, I mean, there's some guys that like Quinshon Judkins was one where like literally it was after the first game of action where he had like what 6 or 8 touches or something like that. That was one where I was willing to make like a huge swing, and I moved him from like running back 52 to like running back 21 in like a single week. I don't know if I'm quite there with Diggs just because, like you said, like we have seen some really good action over the last couple of weeks, but he still is a part-time player. And I want to like ride the hot hand while I can right now, but I don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like 2 months from now.
yeah, and I don't mean to press on you at all in that regard. I think you
No,
do a
please
fantastic
do. I
job.
mean, there's mutual respect here. We can question each other. That's what we do on this show, Jeff. That's why I love doing this one.
Yeah, I think it's you do a fantastic job with those first off, and I think that's one of the most valuable things that we do have on the site. It's just kind of one of those we've talked before about when we can admit that we're wrong and make pivots, and I think that it's I just feel like I bristle a little bit at the idea of like a guy has to incrementally move up versus like sometimes you just look at situations. I blew this one in the offseason, and this guy got to recognize that this is where he's going to be valued.
Yeah, and I mean, I moved him up big this week. I moved him up big
Yeah,
last week as well, and
yeah, one
if he has
more, yeah.
another 100-yard game, yeah, then he's probably going to be inside that top 20. So that's kind of how I do it. It's a tough practice, but it is also a fun exercise. Let's move on to the late afternoon games here, Jeff. Tennessee Titans at Las Vegas Raiders. Titans coming off their first win. Love to see it. Van Jefferson didn't practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday. Tyler Lockett didn't practice Wednesday, but just a rest day, no concern there. Tony Pollard, he always gets his Wednesday rest day back to a full participation on Thursday. And then Tajay Spears coming back from that ankle injury. He played last week in a very limited fashion, limited on the injury report, but no indications that he won't be ready to play. Brock Bowers still not practicing. Of course, Pete Carroll, optimistic he's going to play. He was optimistic he was going to play 2 weeks ago, right before he was declared out to. He was optimistic Chris Carson was going to play a week before he retired. So Pete Carroll, don't take anything he says at face value regarding player injuries. Michael Mayer, though, has been dealing with a concussion for the last few weeks. He missed the last 2 games because of it, but he is practicing in full. We expect to see him out there. Jeff, inflection points. Tennessee Titans coming off a win where everything seemed to bounce in their direction. Cam Ward looked spectacular. Like, oh my goodness. It wasn't just the big deep down throws or downfield throws that got everybody excited. It was him running the offense. It was him getting the ball to Chigakonkwo when he needed to, him using his legs when he needed to, extending plays outside of the pocket. I mean, what I saw from Cam Ward in like the third and fourth quarter is exactly the player I saw at Miami, a guy who was just like marching down the field, looking good, making the throw, showing off the arm talent, showing off the athleticism. I want to say that this is going to continue to carry over now, that like he kind of figured it out and he's got another nice matchup here against a soft Raiders defense. Do you think that we can start to see Cam Ward stack some wins together here?
I could maybe. I think that I can. I feel like I'm going to incrementally move him and say, like, I have confidence that they can be a competent offense in some situations. I think just for me, the 2 biggest stories about the Titans right now are Gunnar Helm emerging in that tight end derby with Chigakonkwo,
Yeah.
beating him out in snaps last week. And, Gunnar Helm is the player that the Titans coaching staff selected. They selected him relatively early. And I think that they're
6th round, I thought. He fell quite
fourth
a bit,
round. I
didn't he?
think pick
Am I crazy?
120.
All right.
Pick 120
All
was
right.
where he was taken. So my math tells me that's about into the 4th round or so. But I think that is one that they tried to see Chigakonkwo going, and it didn't really happen for them. And I think that where they want to be offensively, Gunnar Helm brings a little bit more of what they want. So I think that's an interesting one
We'll
to
see.
watch.
Chigakonkwo, though, was in the hurry-up offense late in the game, and I
Yeah,
mean, he was a
still going to
big
play.
part of those game-winning drives too. Yeah, so I think the hopes that he was going to be like a 100% snap player, probably not doing that anymore. But we did see him a pretty big part of that comeback.
Yes, and he's definitely still going to play. I mean, you probably get a scenario where maybe he's playing more as the slot and Helms in there. The other thing, Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley, where do you think through the first 5 games last year Calvin Ridley was?
God, I hate this game so much. I hate this game, Jeff. Why do you keep doing this to me? Um, I think he got off to a hot start last year. I'm gonna say wide receiver
It's
18.
still Dave. Come on, like you got to get the theme here.
What? I keep
There's a
waiting for you to
theme.
throw a wrench in this. Yeah, all right, all right. So he was like the wide receiver 46.
Wide receiver 62, and then from
Whew.
week, and it even started after week 6 because even we got that. I think we got that 0.9 game was in week 6. After week 6, wide receiver 20. That was including that week 6, but wide receiver 20 the second half of the year, and that's really one where when you look at. I had very high expectations for Calvin Ridley coming into this year, and you look
Yeah.
at it, and week 1 he's got Patrick Surtain. Week 2 week 4 I think it was he had Derek Stingley, and you've got Cam Ward there, and then we saw the big blow up spot last week against the Cardinals. I mean, this feels to me like Calvin Ridley is just throw out the first 4 games here. The Raiders are in a matchup he should take advantage of, being valued a lot closer to where I had him in pre-draft ranks than where he started the first 4 games of the season.
And we saw Iomanor didn't do much last week as well, where a lot of people were talking about like the changing of the guard, that Iomanor was going to take over as that wide receiver 1. And you talk about the tough cornerback matchups that Ridley had to deal with. I do wonder if that was just kind of a side effect of that. So I'm with you, moved Ridley up quite a bit in my rankings, but still a player that I think like is kind of teetering in flex consideration. Not a guy that I'm willing to like move it into the must start territory off of one good game, but do like seeing the signs of life there. Brock Bowers, I think we're both just kind of operating under the assumption that he's going to be out through the bye, right? Miss the next 2 weeks, get a bye, and then hopefully come back in week 9, healthy, no knee brace, Brock Bowers of old.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you're 1-4, and this guy is your cornerstone of your future. Like, if you know that rest
We
is
know teams don't do that though. We as much as we say that is going to happen, that never really actually happens. Like we still see teams out here that are like 2-14 playing their studs late in the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Pete Carroll comment was like, I think from what maybe I'm misremembering it, but it was something to the effect of, I mean, I can't tell Brock Bowers what to do. Like, you think I can tell Brock Bowers what to
Right.
do? Like, I don't know.
I mean, they told him not to play. Like the doctors were telling him through the like 3 weeks, like the only way this is going to heal is with rest, and he was just refusing. And he was like telling the coaching staff, "No, I'm going out there and playing."
Yeah, the Raiders feel like danger zone. Like really, just that Carroll hire does not feel great at this point. The Geno Smith, it doesn't feel like. How do they get this back on track? Probably is my question for the Raiders. There, just I think maybe to me, it's more likely that you've got a quarterback and a coach that it would have been awesome 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, and right now not so awesome. But I think probably the biggest takeaway here is Brock Bowers scratches. I think everybody's going to be really, really high on Michael Mayer. I'm really curious how that breaks down because Albert Akbawebunam is kind of
Nailed
more
it.
like Brock Bowers ish than Michael Mayer would be. And like you let Michael
Ooh,
Mayer
the
do
social team's gonna love to cut this one and share
Michael
it.
Mayer's job, and maybe Albert O does kind of the move around and get the ball in his hands a little bit like what we saw last week. I think it's really an interesting direction this could go. And at the same time, Albert O could
It's
not
funny
even
too
be
because
active, and Ian Thomas is the backup, and it's Michael Mayer. But
it was what everybody on the Raiders beat last week was just saying like Ian Thomas ready for a big role, and then Alberto is the guy who comes out and ends up looking kind of good in this game. So even those that are like most in the know, talking to the coaches, interviewing these guys every single day, they even get thrown for a loop. I mean, so much of what we do is like deception and trying to hide cards from opponents, and that makes it fun.
and I know personally I've been beating myself up. My weekly rankings have not been good, and it's been really frustrating because it's just so much of. I think you've got just a big tier of players that are very similar, and it can one week guy catches a
Yeah.
touchdown, another doesn't, and it just can really shake out in some directions. And it doesn't mean of like I'm like missing every single start sit decision or whatnot, but I kind of had to take a moment and reset and recognize of like I'm leaning very hard into kind of what's happened the last couple of weeks to trend wise. And you've got these offensive coordinators that their entire job is to trick the defensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator
Yep.
is spending 85 hours plus a week to figure out what they're trying to do. And so that offense coordinator is going to do what the defensive coordinator is not going to expect. And so at some level, it's like that is the trick, I think, in week to week, and the frustration in week to week in fantasy football of got to recognize there's some people that are very good at like picking it up week to week, but at the same time, there's a lot of variance week to week. And it's in practice important planned out variants to be able to try to take advantage of some of these situations.
Yeah, it's never the person you most expect, never the person you least expect. It's always the person you most medium expect, which might be Albert Okwuegbunam in this matchup. San Francisco 49ers at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've got Brock Purdy not practicing. Sounds like Mac Jones is going to be in another start here. He's dealing with a knee and an oblique injury, has been limited in practice. And I mean, like, my goodness, you watch him out there on the field the other day. It looked like he was just like a war veteran, like just grimacing after every single hit, getting like picked up off the turf. But he's a warrior. We know that he's going to power through it. I talked about the Cowboys injury report earlier. Bear with us because the 49ers is just as bad. Not quite as long overall, but from a fantasy perspective, we've got even more players to deal with here. Ricky Pearsall also did not practice. Juwan Jennings dealing with an ankle and rib injury, didn't practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday. Kendrick Bourne dealing with a rib injury, practicing in full. Christian McCaffrey got a rest day on Wednesday. And then for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they are banged up as well. Mike Evans still not practicing with a hamstring injury. Chris Godwin not practicing with what they're calling a fibula injury now. Don't like to see that. And then Bucky Irving, 2 injuries, a foot and a shoulder. He's not practicing either. So in this game, Jeff, it looks like we're going to be without Brock Purdy, without Ricky Pearsall, without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin, without Bucky Irving. This is a game that has a ton of offensive firepower, and we're missing out on a lot of it. That being said, I don't know if I've seen any team navigate through injuries over the last few years better than the 49ers and the Buccaneers. Like, these are 2 teams that have just consistently lost big players and just keep winning despite it.
Yeah, I think this is both of them just really a story of resilience and just a story of, I mean, where coaching matters probably is a lot of it. And so it's, I think the 49ers side, this is a big game for Mac Jones because if he wins this, he could unlock $100,000 bonus. He's got a bonus built
Ooh.
into his contract for at 4 wins, 25% snaps of the regular season. He can get $100,000. So this could be the difference between $100,000 payout for Mac Jones or not. And I feel like last week coming out of the just that way that Thursday night, that whole thing went, like Mac Jones has entered the Jameis Winston zone of like just like a probably like a weird dude, like weirder
Lovable.
than we
Yeah.
realized. And like there's like anything is in play of like, oh, by the way, I saw a dead body and like I've like no emotion in this post game interview, and like I'm gonna wear this weird suit, and it's just like
My pants are falling off on the field.
yes, yeah, like, oh my god, I blew my ACL. Actually, it was just a little bit of a cramp. I was perfectly fine. Like it's like you got these. I don't know. He's an interesting cat, but I think that the
It almost
Patriots.
feels like there's some Baker Mayfield in Mac Jones potentially. And did you hear? Oh my gosh, dude, I loved it. I shared it in base camp with our whole staff. Did you see the quote that Baker Mayfield had where he said something? He's like, when I was young, he's like, all of the trash talk and all that stuff. He's like, people said that I was immature and I was a clown and whatever. He's like, but now I do it and I got moxie and I'm a dog and people love it. He's like, the perception changes when you start playing well. And I feel like it's the same thing with Mac Jones. Like when he was in New England, they weren't winning games and people were picking on him. And he was kind of this dorky guy that everybody was like using as the butt of a joke. And now all of a sudden he's winning. He's still the same guy he's always been. But now it's like, oh, Mac Jones, he's so affable. He's so lovable. Like we love rooting for this guy. And man, like winning really is that secret ingredient. Like people love you when you're winning and they hate you when they're losing. Mac Jones right now, same guy he's always been. He's just stringing together some wins.
He really is, and you got to recognize that Patriots situation is impossible. You put him into there to replace Tom Brady, and I mean we're seeing now in college the Bill Belichick coaching maybe wasn't there at the end of that career or that window there for Mac Jones. So it's great to see him get a reset and really kind of you've got to look at him in dynasty leagues, look at him as a guy that could, like you mentioned with Baker Mayfield, like we mentioned with Sam Darnold. Like to me, Mac Jones
Daniel
feels like,
Jones.
yeah, Daniel Jones feels like potential of, we just talked about the Raiders. Maybe that's, well, Geno Smith is an example, but also maybe that's a situation or like some of these situations where they're looking for a quarterback solution, maybe instead of taking a chance on a guy that they don't know that they're sold on, or, you've got the Saints taking Tyler Shuck and they wish they would have just signed Mac Jones instead, or some of these teams that we know how finite and limited and quick those coaching windows can close. If some of these coaches and general managers might just take a chance on Mac Jones being their guy once this season ends.
And what's the common thing we have seen with all of these first round quarterbacks who have kind of resuscitated their careers in their third acts? We saw Daniel Jones take a stop in Minnesota to learn under Kevin O'Connell. We saw Sam Darnold in that same quarterback room with Kevin O'Connell. We saw Baker Mayfield spend some time in Los Angeles with Sean McVay. Now here Mac Jones is with Kyle Shanahan. So kind of taking that year to reset under a good, sound organization with a good offensive-minded coach. That seems to be what helps these guys kind of figure it out before they go make their next stop. So yeah, Mac Jones, a free agent after this season. I'm sure the 49ers would love to keep him around as a backup. Like he is a glue guy. The locker room seems to love him. He can step in and run this offense and win games, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a handful of teams out there saying like, hey, we saw that 49ers tape and we want to take a shot on Mac Jones.
He's signed for next year. So the 49ers did sign him to a
Oh, all
2-year
right.
deal. So, but I could see a team
Lucky for
trading
them.
for him. But I think it's, and
But
you're
also, like, Shanahan really likes Mac Jones. We got to remember, this is the guy Shanahan wanted to draft ahead of Trey Lance, so they might not be willing to trade him. Like, they might just want to keep him around in case things don't work out with Purdy, or Purdy continues to get injured as he has so often in his career.
But look at holistically, look at those guys that you mentioned. And so you got Darnold and Daniel Jones in New York. Like it can't get more intense than being in New York. And you've got Baker Mayfield
Yep.
in Cleveland, where Cleveland fans are
Harsh media.
like harsh media and just insane fan base. And then you've got Mac Jones following Tom Brady. Like this is like, that's impossible situations that some of these guys were put into, and having that opportunity to just reset, to clear your head, just to come in with no expectations, being able to learn, being able to get comfortable. And the other part of it, you talk about the good coaching. It's all the Shanahan tree of, and so many of these
Mhm.
offenses are running offshoots of the Shanahan offense that's really become the base offense in the NFL. And so you come in, Sam Darnold, before he was in Minnesota, spent a year in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan and was able to reset
Yep.
and learn that offense. And so you get these guys, and Sam Darnold's being praised now because he knows Clint Kubiak's offshoot of the Shanahan offense. He knows it like the back of his hand. That's the real key here. If you're getting these guys that were viewed as first round talents because they have this ability, then they get a chance to get that tutelage. Baker Mayfield getting that tutelage with Sean McVay with the Rams when it looked like he was spiraling out of the league. You get these chances for this particular offense that is so dominant across the league, and really just an opportunity to learn and reset. And Mac Jones is getting that right now.
So conversely, by what you're saying is there's no hope for Justin Fields because Matt Nagy, Matt Eberflus, Mike Tomlin, Aaron Glenn, he has not got to dip his toes in that Shanahan system yet. It's been a lot of old school coaching that might be holding him back, but maybe his time will come
Well,
at some point. All right,
maybe.
last game in this late afternoon slate. Yeah, Jeff.
I was gonna say, but probably not. Get Justin Fields a chance to reset behind Caleb Williams in Chicago with the Ben Johnson, and maybe the Ben Johnson offshoots start to become. Maybe that's another offense that rises up, that Ben Johnson offense. But I
Yep.
think on the
I thought it was
49ers,
a great idea, but it's one of those like,
that
as
would be
soon as
really
I
weird.
even like mentioned that, like, what if they just kept Justin Fields and drafted Caleb Williams? And yeah, the Bears did not want to hear that.
Yeah. I think Kendrick Bourne is going to be interesting to see for the 49ers here. We saw that big blowout spot. I think Jawan Jennings being active might change that conversation a little bit. Jake Tonjes has really been under the radar, and he's been really heavily
Yeah.
used the last couple of weeks. So that's a guy that I think is an interesting spot here. We talked about AJ Barner earlier. It was against this Buccaneers defense that got him going. And I think the Buccaneers just probably Rachaad White is probably the biggest thing to watch here. Of Bucky Irving being inactive, expect that heavy volume role for Rachaad White again.
Yeah, looking at my rankings right now, I'm expecting Juwan Jennings to play, and I've got him as a high-end wide receiver too, and I've got Kendrick Bourne just right around wide receiver 50. But if Juwan Jennings is inactive, like if he doesn't respond well today in practice, Jennings comes off my radar, and I think I just put Kendrick Bourne right where Juwan Jennings is as a high-end wide receiver too.
And one more thing that I do want to watch and monitor on this Buccaneers, we started to see Sterling Shepard was such a big story, and it has been a big story. Tez Johnson started to pull. I think Tez Johnson might have even outsat him last week, but they started to pull pretty even. And I think what's happening there is Sterling Shepard is so limited to being into the slot. And so you
Mhm.
probably want Chris Godwin into that role. And I think they're starting to look at it and say, we like what Sterling Shepard has given us, but we want Godwin in the slot role. And in order to get there, maybe Tez Johnson's the part that unlocks that until Mike Evans is able to get back, and or Jalen McMillan later in the season. I think that's starting to trickle a little bit of getting Godwin back acclimated into that slot role. And that's going to be, I think, an interesting thing to watch here. And I think Chris Godwin's a great buy low option right now, because if the narrative right now is, well, he's stuck outside, and Sterling Shepard
Right.
is like that slot guy. And I think that's the narrative around there. I think they know they want Godwin in that slot role, and that will probably start to tick up.
Cincinnati Bengals at Green Bay Packers, last game of this afternoon slate. Jamar Chase got a rest day on Wednesday, but practicing in full. He'll be out there. Joe Flacco expected to start for the Browns after a
Bengals,
midweek
Dave,
trade.
Bengals.
Bengals. Oh my gosh, I Ron Burgundy myself
Ron
right
Burgundy
here.
did.
Reading off of the show sheet that I prepared for myself
I
late
saw it
last
and I was
night
like, I can't
with
stop him. I
buddy
can't stop him.
Joe Flacco expected to start for the Bengals for the Green Bay Packers. Tucker Kraft practicing in full, coming off that elbow injury. Green Bay Packers are rested up after a bye week. Jordan Love also practicing in full. Christian Watson back in the fold. My goodness, I did not expect that. I believe it was a week 17 ACL tear, and he is already back out there practicing. So love to see that. And then Savion Williams dealing with a groin injury. He's limited as well. Jeff, of course, we got to talk about Joe Flacco, what it means for this team. I think Jamar Chase, we saw he can just like will himself into a big 2 touchdown game. It doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure I could go out there and start 17 games for the Bengals, and Jamar Chase would still have 2 weeks where he'd finish as the top scoring wide receiver. But I think the one that I'm most excited about in this offense is going to be Chase Brown, because we have seen that, Chase Brown can't get much going behind this offensive line. And I think what we saw from Jake Browning is that he's going to take a sack, force a ball into triple coverage, or take off and run. Joe Flacco, very familiar playing behind bad offensive lines. He just did it in Cleveland. And what we saw was Dylan Sampson having a game with 8 targets, Jerome Ford having a game with 6 targets. Flacco is quickly going to get off his read if a guy's not open and check down. And we know that so much of Chase Brown's value can come in the pass catching game. So probably too late to go out and buy Chase Brown now. He was a guy I was hoping to make some trades for this week. Couldn't pull any off, but I think that, given like the 95% opportunity share that we've been seeing from Chase Brown, knowing that now he has a quarterback that's going to be willing to check down, I could see Chase Brown quickly getting back on track in fantasy.
I definitely don't think it's too late to buy Chase Brown, at least from what I feel like I've seen the temperature at least. But again, tweets are cheap and action is not cheap. So, maybe,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
it's,
It's really easy to tweet, go buy Chase Brown. It's really hard to pull
well,
off a deal where you're getting Chase Brown.
it's really easy to tweet, "Oh my God, Chase Brown, 5 alarm fire. This has been terrible." And it's really hard to be like, "Okay, well, sell him to me at that price." And no, it doesn't really work that way. That's kind of where more my mind is. I think Flacco.
I got Chase Brown at wide receiver or running back 18 this week, which like even feels too low, but like based on what we've seen so far, can't get him ahead of Travis Etienne, can't get him ahead of Rico Dowdle, J.K. Dobbins, Brees Hall, Rashad White. But like it feels like if Chase Brown comes out and is a top 5 running back on the week, it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
I think Flacco's an interesting conversation here, just in terms of playing the Packers right away, because we saw him beat the Packers, and that was kind of
Yep.
a major early season shock. And he turns around, and he plays them again. I mean, you've got to think like Flacco throughout his entire career, he's never been in a situation where he can look to one side and see some Brown Chase, and look to the other side and see T. Higgins, and this looks fun. And that's kind of where
hmm
you talk about the dump off targets and things like that, maybe, but I mean, the Browns definitely don't have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins line up outside. To me, I feel like maybe we're going to get a little bit of YOLO last career chance. Like, just feed these guys. Let's just give 25 targets to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and let's have some fun with this. I think that's probably maybe where their mind is for Zach Taylor and the Bengals of, the ship is going down. Let's just see what these wide receivers can do and give.
They're playing the violins right now
Yeah,
as it's sinking.
as it's sinking, and let's just throw it out here. Joe Flacco, just cut it loose and just feed these guys over and over again is where my hope is that this Bengals offense is.
For the Packers, any major takeaways here? I mean, we see them coming out of the bye, as I said, well rested. Everybody's healthy. I think like the hope here is that we always talk about like rookies coming out of the bye. Can Matthew Golden put it together? Like we saw some itty bitty flashes here and there through the first month of the season. Nothing really came to fruition, but like, is he going to be that guy now who can step up as the wide receiver when he was drafted to be out of the bye? I tend to put a little bit of pause there. I think Romeo Doubs is just the guy and they like him and he is going to continue scoring fantasy points and catching touchdowns no matter how much fantasy managers want to gnash their teeth about it. That's kind of where I'm at here, but also like I could see the upside case for Matthew Golden as well.
Well, that last time we saw the Packers was that tie against Dallas, and that last target in the last play of that game went to, or second to last play of the game went to Matthew Golden in the end zone. So I think
Mhm.
that's a underrated thing that, it didn't translate to fantasy points, but the intention was definitely there. And we saw him open that game with that big play, and then just kind of, it was a weird game of him like the spin moves and just kind of getting lit up at some periods of time. And it seems to be so far he's kind of stepped into the Jaden Reed role, which is we
Right.
know that can generate fantasy points, but also it's not going to be an every down role. So I think that's where we're sitting right now with him. I think just the biggest thing with the Packers, this feels like that offense should continue clicking against a weak Bengals defense and kind of a get right game for everybody. The big question will be, can the Bengals continue to push against what has been a strong Packers defense to be able to allow some big explosion days out of the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, you're starting Josh Jacobs, so I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I got Josh Jacobs as my wide receiver, or I'm sorry, my running back 3 on the week. Chris McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor are the only guys I prefer ahead of Jonathan Taylor going up against this, or ahead of Josh Jacobs going up against this Bengals defense. I expect
Where,
a big game from
where do you have
Jacobs.
Jordan Love real quick?
Jordan Love. Let me flip over to my quarterback rankings. I have Jordan Love, QB 10. So ahead of Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold. I mean, a pretty aggressive ranking.
Yeah, he's my quarterback 7 this week. So
All right. Yeah, I think we're both ahead of consensus on him. Let's talk about the primetime matchups, Jeff. We're getting spoiled this week, man. We got some awesome primetime matchups. Detroit Lions going to Kansas City to play against the Chiefs. Amon St. Brown dealing with a wrist injury. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Everybody panicked. He's a dog. Back at practice on Thursday, full participation. We'll see him out there. Khalif Raymond didn't practice on Wednesday, limited Thursday, dealing with a neck injury for the Chiefs. they do this thing, man. It is so annoying. They do this all the time. Like they just put everybody on the injury report. Everybody is a full practice, but Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquise Brown, Kareem Hunt, Patrick Mahomes, all listed on the injury report, all expected to play. So no huge concern here. What are your takeaways from this one, Jeff?
Lions, the shift in personnel. We talked about it on our usage episode, but
Wait, I do need to correct myself. Xavier Worthy, full participant, was actually downgraded to a DNP on Thursday. So there's a lot of talk that that was just kind of precautionary, just letting him rest it up. But we'll closely be seeing what Xavier Worthy does on Friday. Sorry, just wanted to fact check myself before we dive into this game too much.
Yeah, real quick on Xavier. There was it was like the sniper got him at one point in that game, and he was down, like crumpled in a heap, and like I thought the game was over for Worthy, and then he bounces right back again. So I don't know if it's gonna be kind of one of those things with him. If he's that gonna be that type of player that is just gonna drive us crazy with like in and out yo-yo, like is like Jalen Waddle keeping
Jalen
sacks in
Waddle.
the blue tent basically, but I don't know. So I think the Lions side, starting with the Lions side, just how much it's going to be interesting to see this game because how much of we saw a dramatic shift in their personnel usage last week with Brock Wright being utilized heavily, with Sam Laporta intentional targets early in that game, treated as the slot receiver basically. Isaac Tisla stepping into the wide receiver 3 role, but a diminished wide receiver 3 role with Khalif Raymond not even playing at all. Jameson Williams not able to get going. Is this going to be a team that they are going to lean a little bit heavier into the almost the Packers model is what it reminded me of last week, where you're getting Brock Wright as like the guy that is in line as a blocker, but he's all targets too. And you're able to free up Sam Laporta and move him around. And that was where he was so good his rookie year of being able to be broken off the line, moved around and doing that. And with Tisla as that wide receiver 3 to come in, or was that just we know we're going to blow the Bengals out. We want to lean on the run game, this David Montgomery spot. We want that to be going on. So we're going to play 2 tight ends heavy in this game just to be able to run the ball there. How much of what direction there is kind of going to be the thing to watch for Detroit.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out as well. And I mean, this is one like I feel like we know where the targets are mostly consolidated to. Let me just ask you, Jeff, for people who are like, searching the waiver wire, looking for a flex play this week, injuries, bye weeks, when you look at all of these kind of tertiary options for the Kansas City Chiefs, Marquise Brown, Tyquan Thornton, Juju Smith-Schuster, who do you prefer of the bunch if somebody's scouring the waiver wire for a flex play?
Oh, it's easily got to be Thornton at this point. I think it's and that was my biggest takeaway from the Chiefs last week and I kind of wondered if we wouldn't see that. And we didn't really see that the week before, but we definitely saw it last week where Thornton's speed just unlocks so much of this. And when you got Patrick Mahomes there and you're going to be acclimating Rashee Rice in, to me, Thornton feels like the natural wide receiver 3 from the performance that we've seen to start the season, but also what having his speed on the boundary opens up for just the intermediate of where you're able to work Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy kind of around there. And so to me, Thornton, I feel like is the guy that I definitely want out of the rest of these pieces. I think Hollywood Brown probably.
I want to go back to what you said about Mac Jones, like getting drafted in like a checked out end of his career Bill Belichick offense. And then we saw kind of the dumpster fire last year with Gerard Mayo as well. Like it almost feels like Tyquan Thornton, like we knew he was a good player, like a second round pick, off the charts speed. Second round pick, I think. I'm pulling that off the top of my head. I could be wrong. But yeah, we knew he like had a good profile and could have been a good player, and it just felt like he was set up to fail in New England. And like now in a better infrastructure, better quarterback, we're seeing him be the player that we thought he can be. So I think there's a lot of just like sell Tyquan Thornton. This is Fugazi. This isn't going to last. And I'm not there. Like I think this is a good player, and he plays a very important role in this offense. So I talked about Tyquan Thornton going into week 2 as my start of the week, and people thought I was like crazy for mentioning Tyquan Thornton, but like I immediately saw week 1, like this dude looks unlocked, he looks revitalized, and he looks really good in this offense.
Yeah, and that was a good call. And I know we had a little bit of a bet on this show that we got to figure out how to pay off, but you hammered me there. I was on the Marquise Brown, and you were on Tyquan Thornton. I think Thornton's the right call, and I think that as I was to close it out there, I think after this week, you're getting Rashee Rice plugged in. And by the way, like stop offering trades for the Rashee Rice manager in your league. That is the to me that's offensive. That like you're
Somebody offered me a trade for their Rashi Rice just yesterday, Jeff. They offered me Rashi Rice for Kyron Williams, and I'm very tempted to take it.
okay. I mean, I arguably would take that depending on where my running back stands.
It's a guy
But
who's sitting at 1-4 right now, and he needs a shakeup, and I need a receiver, and I'm on the fence.
I probably would feel comfortable taking that, to be honest. But
For what it's worth, it's weird scoring where you get point 0.1 per carry and half a point for
okay,
first down, so
yeah,
it is juiced towards running backs a little bit.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you there. But I feel like it's like I just see it where people have held Rasheed Rice for 5 weeks, just waiting for this moment to be able to plug him back in. And then you get these people like, oh, Rasheed Rice is still out this week. Maybe I'm going to trade for him this week. And like the other person carried all like those weeks. I'm going to buy him right now. No, you're going to buy 150% of the freight on Rasheed Rice if you're trying to buy him right now. And to offer a buy low on Rasheed Rice at this point in time is offensive, and stop doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if the offer comes your way, think about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
don't go out and try to trade for Rashi Rice. All right, Jeff.
Running
Monday
backs,
night.
real quick on the Chiefs
Yeah.
running backs. I mean, I know, and you good call out that more intentional usage for Brashad Smith. To me, I don't know that I saw a single thing that Brashad Smith did that a running back does last week, and so I think
Oh no, he is like a gimmicky. Like he's almost playing more of like the Rashi Rice role than he is the
yes,
Jerick McKinnon role.
yes, yeah, and that's scheme touches to Rishi Rice and to Xavier Worthy, going to scheme into Brashad Smith. I don't know. I just think that there's this narrative out there that he can take over to be the backfield, to be the running back, and they're not using him like a running back. So the idea that that's going to happen, and I mean, Kareem Hunt was solid. I think Isaiah Pacheco looked so much better than Kareem Hunt in terms of explosion. And to me, what I'm seeing out of this backfield is they're just not giving Pacheco enough run to feel comfortable coming off that injury, but the explosion is definitely there. And I think if the best case of this offense would be to lean heavily on Pacheco as the running back with Kareem Hunt as kind of a change of pace back, but they're splitting this down the middle. And I think rhythm is really a big deal for running backs. And I don't know that you're giving the opportunity for Pacheco to get into rhythm, to recognize, and maybe that's just me on my Pacheco priors and holding that bag heavily for him, but I see him as the most explosive running back there. And I think the potential is that we're starting to see him rip some chunk yardage, whereas before, early in the season, it was like you could tell he just wasn't comfortable yet, and he would just get tripped up and those types of things. And those types of things have kind of disappeared a little bit, and it started to be the 15-yard gash. It's just give him some real volume.
It just clicked for me. Do you know who Brashard Smith is?
Tarek Cohen is who Waldman called him out.
I think that's a good one, but I'm thinking an old Andy Reid running back from about 15 years ago, nicknamed Slash on ESPN. He had running back and wide receiver eligibility, if you remember. Charkandrick West. He was one, Dexter McCluster, very similar, but also Charkandrick West.
Okay.
Like, we have seen guys in this kind of hybrid role for Andy Reid before, and we never really saw it when he was with the Eagles, but since he's been a part of Kansas City, we have seen these kind of hybrid running back receivers that are used on these gimmicky touches, and I think the thing that made them so nice before was the dual eligibility during bye weeks and injuries. Unfortunately, with Brashard Smith only being a running back, you don't get that versatility that makes him valuable, but still a fun player. But yeah, I think that you are right that Isaiah Pacheco looked revitalized last week. And I still think that Kareem Hunt can do a lot of the things. It almost in a way reminds me of Seattle, where you've got Isaiah Pacheco in the sort of Kenneth Walker role where he can rip off the big plays and the explosives, but he's also going to do some things that make you want to pull your hair out every now and then. And then you got Kareem Hunt, who, like, you ask him to pick up 3 yards, he's going to get 3 yards. If you're sitting at the goal line, he's going to punch that touchdown in. And it does feel kind of reminiscent of that. Jeff, I don't even want to talk about this game, man. Like, my PTSD is triggered right now just looking at Chicago Bears at Washington Commanders. Like,
well, there's another game we can talk
NFL.
About before that game if you want to talk about.
Oh, yeah, the Buffalo Bills and Atlanta Falcons. That's right. Dalton Kincaid limited this week with an oblique injury. Curtis Samuel limited with neck and ribs. And then Darnell Mooney yet to practice with a hamstring injury. I don't want to hit the panic button yet, Jeff, but we do see this a lot. And, we'll talk about Terry McLaurin in a bit as well, and kind of lump Terry McLaurin and Darnell Mooney in together. That a lot of times we see these like preseason injuries, guys miss a bunch of camp. They come into the season not fully conditioned, and then they get injured, and then they pick up another injury, and they pick up another injury, and it just ends up being one of those years. Is that it feels like that's kind of where we're trending with Darnell Mooney at this point.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely there on Darnell Mooney, and I think just the bigger part of it, we're seeing the passing game usage from Bijan Robinson, and we're not going to get out of this without playing this game one more time. Where do you think Bijan Robinson was through 5 weeks last year, running back rankings?
RB 228.
Close, RB 21, and
All right, yeah, right
he
there,
was running back
almost got it.
2 the rest of the year. So just kind of again wrapping that up, this examples of these players that we think we know what we
I actually
have
would have
this
gotten
year.
that one. I remember the panic, the early season panic about Bijan last year.
Yeah, and I think Mooney, I think, is a key part of their offense, but not like from what we saw last year, where it was like Darnell Mooney's like the only other piece of this passing game next to Drake London. I don't think they're there now, and I think a lot of, again, we're not going to get out of this one more time without mentioning Mike Kashuba, but Mike mentioned last night that we had a question about, somebody was asking about Kyle Pitts, and Mike was kind of like, well, he's doing it with Darnell Mooney out. Is this really real? And to me, I think from what we've seen from Kyle Pitts is really real, and I think that it's just a different target environment, probably because of the way that Michael Penix is able to attack vertically, opens things up for, especially just drive the ball in the middle of the field, opens things up for Kyle Pitts that wasn't really there for Kirk Cousins, that was kind of relying on the struggle targets to Darnell Mooney as that second receiver, and then unlocking Bijan Robinson in the passing game. Doesn't feel like they're screaming, we need Darnell Mooney back in this offense. It feels like we've got Drake London, let's treat him as the wide receiver one. That was the big reset for them off that shutout against the Panthers, of getting back to, well, we've got these 3 studs here with Kyle Pitts, with Drake London, with Bijan Robinson. Let's treat them like studs instead of let's getting cute and trying to be like a run heavy or like whatever it might be offense.
So I got a question for you, Jeff, and you can give the insight from your Bills fandom here. Is Dalton Kincaid the Bills wide receiver one?
I think he is when it comes to usage, I think he's, given in the context of the lower threshold for tight ends to have that usage to be relevant. I think Dalton Kincaid right now is the player that you want. I think they're really struggling outside, and especially the Patriots, where Patriots played fantastic against them, but they're really struggling outside to get receivers unlocked and to create separation. Joe Brady talked a lot about separation coming out of that game, and figuring out how to get the receivers unlocked is a big struggle. But because of that, it's opening up the middle of the field, and Dalton Kincaid is really taking advantage of that. And Dalton Kincaid has been everything that you'd want to see. And I think that's another this is an interesting game here with like Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts here, because this is like 2 poster children for Dynasty, just like kind of in general, young tight ends, and kind of writing the book on players. And Dalton Kincaid was really hurt last year, and just like playing through it, like it was kind of that, and then it was a tough mental year for him, and he's really taken off now after having an opportunity to reset.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I loved what I saw from Dalton Kincaid last week. So I've got Khalil Shakir at my wide receiver 34. I've got Keon Coleman as wide receiver 42, which, like, you think of a Josh Allen led offense, like, how do we not have a good wide receiver of the bunch? But Dalton Kincaid is the guy. Like, I've got him as my tight end 5. You look Jake Ferguson, Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft, and then Dalton Kincaid. Like, I'm looking at him right now and kind of that elite tier of tight ends. He's looked fantastic this year, and we saw the big career high in yardage last week. So want to see that continue, just like seeing him continue to develop.
Agree.
Last game, Chicago Bears, Washington Commanders. Terry McLaurin not practicing this week with a quad injury. And like I said, kind of feels like Darnell Mooney. You miss some time, you don't get calloused up in camp, start picking up these injuries, and it just kind of snowballs from there. So definitely having some concerns about Terry McLaurin. I think I saw him hit the trade block in every single league that I'm in this week, where a lot of people are just saying, like, I'm fed up with this. Deebo Samuel not practicing with a heel/rest. We saw this last week. He didn't practice didn't practice Wednesday and Thursday. Ended up hitting the final practice of the week, and gave us another top 10 performance, so no concern there. Noah Brown limited. Chris Rodriguez did not practice. Jaden Daniels full participant. And then for the Bears coming out of the bye, Kyle Monangai not practicing with a thigh injury. Don't like to see that after a week of rest. And then Colson Loveland also with a week of rest, logging a limited practice, dealing with a hip injury. So it's been a disappointing year for these Bears rookies with so many expectations for Colson Loveland and Luther Burden and Kyle Monangai. And it just seems like none of it is coming to fruition. That could change after the bye week, but I think it's just such a crowded offense that I don't see a path to relevance for any of these rookies.
Yeah, and I don't know that the Bears, sometimes you hit your bye week with, maybe you're struggling, you're trying to figure out, how do we unlock these players? How do we reset this offense? I think the Bears are on the opposite side of feeling like, we've got Roma
Hey,
Dunze.
this has
Like,
been working for us.
yes, this is
Yeah.
working. Caleb is feeling great. We got Roma Dunze's looking like a true number one receiver. We're feeling really comfortable with the spot that we're in right now. And so that's where I think this early bye, I don't know that that helps the rookies here, because I think if you're 2 or 3 weeks down the road and you're like, man, we've just gotten nothing from Loveland and Burden, and we're kind of hitting a rut right now. Let's figure out how to put that together. Right now, you just want to see more of what you saw so far. You just want to see more Roma Dunze, more Caleb Williams, that relationship growing and making sure that Caleb Williams is comfortable. And it's like it's classic like trucks and trailers conversation right now with Caleb Williams, with this offense of, you got to turn Caleb Williams into a truck, and as part of that is you're leaning on these veterans of having the Cole Kmet, the DJ Moore, the Olamide Zaccheaus, and also the emerging Roman Dunze as the veteran pieces around Caleb Williams to get him super comfortable, because sooner rather than later you're going to get to a place where Caleb Williams is that truck now. Okay, now we can get Luther Burden going, and now we can get Colson Loveland going, and now we can shift a little bit here. But I think that that's just the place that we're at with right now with the Bears.
And I've heard a lot of just like the post buy bump discussion. And, I don't want to pick on Alfredo Brown, a sharp guy, but we had that conversation a couple of days ago on our show. And he talked about Luther Burden coming out of the buy. And I said, I just don't see it. Like, I've been paying close attention to the Bears beat. And I think that there are like special things that Luther Burden can do. Like when they say, hey, we have a opportunity to get behind this Dallas defense on a flea flicker, go out there and use those young, fresh legs to just burn down the field and we'll get you the ball. He can do that. But I think when you ask him to step into the role that Olamide Zaccheaus is playing, where he's running choice routes and he's making decisions on the fly and he's finding the soft spots in zones and the pre-snap motion, I don't think Burden is there mentally. And that's kind of what I'm hearing out of Chicago. So I think we could see some gimmicky usage. Like, hey, if they can drop another flea flicker, that's awesome. Or if you can say, hey, just run a deep post and we're going to split the middle of it and we can hit you there. Or we're going to hit you on an end around. He can do those sorts of things. But I think what Olamide Zaccheaus brings cerebrally to the team, I don't know if cerebrally is a word, but what he brings between the ears and the intentional blocking, all of that sort of stuff, I think that's why Zaccheaus is going to maintain his role. So I think without an injury to Zaccheaus or a trade or an injury to DJ Moore, I think Burden is kind of a guy that we're just hoping that 2026 can be his year.
Yeah, and we know how reactive the dynasty community can be off those receivers that have those rookie years. And so I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
buy yet on Luther Burden, but I definitely know I will be a big buy on Luther Burden if this continues. And I think it's trust. It's just trust. At the end of the day, it's trust. And that's the biggest thing that it comes down to. It's the conversation is always in the fantasy space of like, let's get this new, fresh, young guy going. Look how explosive he is. And like, it's like the Rams conversation with Kyron Williams. The level of trust that Sean McVay has in Kyron Williams is just at a completely different level than the idea that Jarkus Hunter is going to steal this job. And so like that's just the big of it. And you talk about those choice routes and it's Zaccheaus doing what he is supposed to do on every single play, on understanding it and being where he's supposed to be and being able to read those routes correctly and open up Caleb Williams for success. You're relying on the high level of trust that you have in Cole Kmet, in Olamide Zaccheaus, versus the explosion that could be unlocked with Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. And that doesn't mean that it's not ever going to happen. It just means that that's not where we are right now.
And I want to say too, I know I talked about Zaccheaus a lot in the preseason. I'll say that he's still like, if he's on waivers, pick him up. There have been rumblings about a potential DJ Moore trade, and Olamide Zaccheaus is very clearly the third wide receiver on this team. He is third in routes run. He's pacing for 94 targets right now, and if DJ Moore is moved out of the picture, that's just going to mean an even bigger role for him. So, a guy who probably isn't going to, finish the year as a top 20 receiver by any means, but I think he's a guy that, like, had he scored just a touchdown or two this year on the volume that he's had, people would would be buzzing about Zacchaeus, but he's been kept out of the end zone. So I think a lot of the usage kind of floats under the radar. But as we're starting to hit more buys and more injuries, he can make for, a decent flex play on a weekly basis. Last thing I want to
Well,
say about
do
this
you
game, Jeff. Yeah,
I'm gonna push back a little bit here because do you feel good putting DJ Moore into your lineup right now?
no, I really don't.
Okay. And so that's where I think like look at Miami's situation. And I think this is another area. Matt Waldman's very smart, and Matt Waldman nailed it from week one, where there was so much talk about like this is gonna unlock Malik Washington now, and this is gonna be
Hmm.
and I think that when you have role players, they stay in the role. And I think that
Fair.
what we saw out of the Dolphins was Westbrook Akine comes in, he runs a straight line, and defenses leave him alone, and he is just that guy to take the top off. Malik Washington stays in Malik Washington's role, and the volume just gets shoveled to Waddle, Waller, and Achane, the difference makers within that offense. And so that's where I think that you're right on Zacchaeus. I think that it was a good call by you on Zacchaeus versus where he was sitting in the consensus mind. Like I think you got that call right, and these people are like coming to you and saying that you got this call wrong because he's not
I mean, he
fantasy
was a
relevant.
consensus wide receiver 112
Exactly.
in draft rankings. I was looking the other day and I was saying,
Exactly.
hey, take a shot on this guy in round 20. And, I think like, yeah, what you're hoping for is that he could have 4 catches and a touchdown, which you're not getting from a lot of other guys off of waivers.
Yeah, and so that's my point on just kind of in general of if DJ Moore were to leave this offense, DJ Moore's not fantasy relevant right now. And so the idea that somebody else is going to be fantasy relevant because DJ Moore left this offense, I think you're just going to have Roma Dunze doing Roma Dunze things. You'll start to unlock Luther Burden a little bit, and you would start to get Colson Levelet out there. But in terms of fantasy relevance, I just am hesitant to say that it's going to follow just because I think that it's going to be the Roma Dunze show.
Loveland is another guy that I'm just chalking up as kind of an L for 2025. We probably should have seen this coming. Like, had the season-ending shoulder injury last year, was recovering all offseason. During the preseason, picked up a handful of injuries, has already been limited with injuries and missed games throughout this season. It is so hard to come mid-season as a rookie and just like get up to speed. And I worry that he's missed out on some very valuable playing time. Last thing I want to say about this game, though, Jeff, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, very clear RB1 of this backfield, right? Like we were kind of just jumbling all these guys at like the RB3, RB4 bubble, waiting to see how it would pan out. And I'm at the point now, Corey Krosky-Merritt is my RB19 on the week, and I have Chris Rodriguez, Jeremy McNichols, nowhere near the fantasy radar in my rankings.
Yep, I think that's the way to take it. And it's really, I know we were lower, quote unquote. I think we were more realistic about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and we knew the takeover would happen. We just weren't sure when it would happen, and it wasn't the initial wheels up, let's go, but it wasn't actually ended up being far off of it. So, I mean, if you got Krosky-Merritt, if you grabbed him, the price that you paid for him is probably fantastic. I feel very comfortable. I don't feel like I've seen a lot of like, is this the Woody Mark situation? And I don't see that there. This is, Nick Chubb is a player that the Texans trusted, and I think that was a matchup dependent thing. I don't see the Woody Marks rug pull on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I see the player that this really helps unlock this Commanders offense. And so I think maybe this might be your last good buy opportunity for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt because of those concerns about some of these other rookies that have had a little bit of false starts.
And we talked at length on Wednesday's show about just like the schematics of this team, like, playing heavily out of 12 personnel and 13 personnel, getting these jumbo packages, having the threat of Jaden Daniels as a rusher, plus Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I mean, it just makes sense for them to continue leaning on him as opposed to the other guys in the backfield. So I think we're in agreement there. Well, Jeff, got it just under 2 hours today. We are in mid-season form. It was funny when we started doing the show at the top of the season. We're like, let's try to tighten it up a little bit. Let's see if we can keep these shows to under an hour. And that lasted a few weeks. Here we are, really having fun. Love doing the show with you, man. It just really helps me get like a good read on the week. I was talking to my wife about it last night, actually. She was like asking me questions about start-sit lineups. I said, babe, let me do my Thursday injury report article, and then I'm going to talk with Jeff tomorrow, and then I'll have a much clearer picture on the week, and then I will help you with all of your start-sit questions. So the show, hopefully the audience gets as much value out of it as you and I do having these conversations. But Jeff, as always, thanks for the time. Everyone listening, thank you for taking the time to listen. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Best of luck this weekend, and we will see you next week.